Hey everyone, it's Brad and Josh here, and we welcome you to We'll Bring the Popcorn, the ultimate film and TV podcast.
Today on episode number 100 of the podcast, we're going to be reviewing the new film Wake Up Dead Man and discuss the greatest film trilogies of all time.
Wake Up Dead Man, A Knives Out Mystery is the third film in the Knives Out trilogy here by Rian Johnson, and it continues the exploits of the detective Benoit Blanc, who is Daniel Craig doing, of course, if you haven't watched the other two, he does this ridiculous southern, like, Louisiana accent that is just incredible. Like, I love hearing him just chew up a scene with that dialogue. But we're picking up in a different location, in a different area, where we have a church that has a pastor, Jefferson Wicks, that is kind of almost cult-like status with his church. He's got his flock and his followers. He's very interesting with how he does his sermons and how he runs his church and stuff. But we have a new pastor that is sent to help him at his church, and Pastor Judd, or Father Judd. And it's really interesting to see the dynamic that happens there. We have Father Judd played by Josh O'Connor. We have Jefferson Wicks as Josh Brolin. Those two play off of each other. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor with this. There's a lot of course, religious commentary and political commentary and commentary on influencers and a lot of different areas there. But I'll admit I had a lot of fun with this again. Like, I've really enjoyed these Knives Out mysteries. It's something about trying to unravel it that it's making you think while you're watching the film and wanting you to, well, you may suspect every single person at one point in this film, and it can somewhat be a little predictable of finding out who it was in the end, who all was involved with it. But I think overall they did a really good job of keeping that mystery kind of fluid and mixing up exactly who it was. So you may have suspected someone, but they took you away from it for a little while. But it was a good time for me.
Yeah, I had a blast watching this too. These are fun. I love a good murder mystery story, and these are a fun modern take on the genre. Like, we don't get too many of these anymore, but this is such a fun trilogy, and this is a great entry in it, in my opinion. Like you said, I love the Benoit Blanc character, who's, basically in this story playing an atheist in a church. Like, he only believes in the truth. The truth is the truth, no matter how you want to sugarcoat it. But this was a fun case in this movie where you get, the death of, spoiler alert, it's the death of, Jefferson Wicks here, and they're trying to solve the murder here and all of the shenanigans around it. And it's just so much fun because they get a really solid cast for all of these films. Like, they get well-known names to play all the different characters.
Glenn Close.
Yeah, like Glenn Close is one that stood out in this one too, but you had Mila Kunis, you had Jeremy Renner, you had like a lot of well-known actors in this movie, and it's just so much fun to go on this journey of like playing who did it and them kind of toying with it, where you almost feel in some points it's going to be very obvious at the beginning who did it, and then they kind of throw in a twist in there just to kind of throw you off the scent, and then come back around and it could be somebody you initially suspected, but done in a way you weren't really expecting. Like that, That's kind of the formula that they put together for these. But it's just a fun, it's just a fun journey you go on to try to figure out, like, okay, who was involved? Why were they involved? What's the circumstances around it? And they just play with that in these films so well. They're just highly entertaining, funny mystery movies.
You can't even go almost slapstick at some point when Jefferson Wicks was doing his first confession to Judd, and the stuff he was throwing out. Like, okay, Pastor, that's
a lot.
That's a lot. But yeah, I mean, you got Glenn Close as Martha. She is pretty much the main woman at the church. She takes care of the finances. She takes care of making sure the pastor eats and makes sure like everything is taken care of there. You've got Thomas Hayden Church as a groundskeeper, Sampson, who I wanted a little bit more out of him just because I love him as an actor. Like he can do serious and comedy so well, and this is a blend of a little bit serious with comedic elements in it. I wanted a little bit more out of him, but he did great in what he was given. You even got Jeffrey Wright in a small role playing the kind of one of the higher up priests and pastors. He's the one that kind of sends Judd out, but you've got pastors cursing and saying stuff off kilter. So it's not taking itself too seriously. So you should know by now, especially like the last one with Glass Onion, with how it went heavy into celebrity and, the rich and powerful and that. And this is more of a kind of low country church of just this backwater town and everything else. So you get a different perspective. It even took a little bit before Daniel Craig's character with Blanc showed up into the film, maybe about 45 minutes or so before he really showed up into the film. And of course he shows up in style and everything else. I love Daniel Craig in this character because, he started this when he was towards the end of Bond, and it was such a different departure from what we were seeing in the very dark and serious and grittiness of Bond, and to have him come into this with that accent and just playing this role. Like, he's perfect for this role. Like, he was just another amazing performance by him in this. Like, you just smiled and laughed. At least I did when he was on screen.
Yeah, the accent's incredible. It's so over the top and funny. Like we were talking about before, it's like this Southern foghorn, leghorn Methodist. Like it's so funny to hear it. It's very imitatable for us. It's like I have a lot of fun, talking like Benoit Blanc if you need to, just to be silly over the top. But yeah, this was fun, man. This goes on a very realistic but over the top portrayal of what can happen when this priest gains like this cult-like following where he has these very devoted members of the church, and what's going on with each of them and how they all come together and come, why they're in the flock as they call them. And it's just a fascinating group of characters that we get here. And it goes on a fun journey, man. This was a lot of fun. I got a lot of joy out of guessing who did it, and wound up being correct and half correct, I would say, in who I thought was ultimately responsible for these things. But it's just a cool story, man. They go dark when they need to. They bring a ton of levity and comedy when they need to. It's a good mix of genres that they put together in these movies, and this one I think it holds up with the other two, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really solid. It's a ton of fun. But yeah, the story is it's layered in it, because you start off, it's about, Father Judd, who at 17, he had been boxing and something went wrong. So he decided to devote his life to the church, and he gets to the main church where he's, learning and everything else, and is punching out another pastor, which gets him sent to this church. But he's trying to do the right thing, while at the same time you got Jefferson Wicks, who's very much a cult leader of this church. Like, they even go into it that he weeds out the weak of the people who don't follow him with his sermons every week, because he goes off on these tangents and everything. But there's a deeper layer, because there's a mystery about the church, because his grandfather, who ran the church for a while, had kind of a mystery around him, that he apparently had left the church and left his heirs all this money and his legacy, but nothing could be found. And there's, a deeper story with a woman named Grace, and with, just all of this, and a crypt that cannot be opened from the outside, unless you use heavy equipment, can only be opened from the inside, which is, a little weird, because, who would be opening a crypt from the inside? Right. But there's a lot of mystery like that, and you get different characters. You've got like a sci-fi author who lives in this town, who is kind of struggling to get his next book out, and he's writing a book about, Jefferson Wicks. You have Kerry Washington playing Vera Draven, who's a realtor, and she's this kind of just another kind of mystery person, which I'm not going to go into too much detail in some of these characters, because it's very important to the mystery in the story. You got Jeremy Renner playing Dr. Nat, who is, the local town doctor. But all of these characters, including Cy, who's like this influencer who wants to be in politics, and even a joke about climate and the political space, with like, I tried this and I tried that and I tried this. Like, it's just nailing all the different staples that the politicians go after and stuff, and none of it worked. But each one of these have, it sets up a good motive on why they could have been the killer, or why they weren't the killer. And yeah, we said it does such a great job of making, okay, it's definitely them. Well, maybe it's this person now. Oh, maybe it's this person now. And that's the good thing about a well done murder mystery, is that it does make you second guess your first choice, or your second choice, your third choice. It makes you think, because you may end up getting most of the ending correct, but it adds enough of that sleight of hand and that mystery on who potentially this could be, that it never really felt like from moment one that you did not have any suspicion that it could be anyone else but this person. And that's just a bravo to a well-crafted story.
Yeah, I mean, the writing on this is done really well. It's shot beautifully. It doesn't linger in too many subjects for too long. Like, it kind of moves along. For it being almost 2.5 hour movie, like, it moves at a relatively well done pace. Like, it doesn't really suffer from any pacing issues, I don't think, either, which is something we try to be cognizant of when you get to a longer film. Like, does it need to be that long?
It's almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah, and I don't think it really suffered from any pacing issues either. It kept you engaged the entire time. Like, this was one that I was, forcibly paying attention to, like, seeing if I missed any, like, minor details, especially when you get to the reveal where you're like, okay, this is what actually happened, and there's a lot of speculation. And the way they just kind of, like you said, give you that sleight of hand where you're looking one way while something's happening over here that you need to be sure you're also paying attention to. And they do a fun job of making the little details matter when you pay attention to something, because it's almost a blink and you can miss it, but then when they slap you in the face with it later, you're like, oh yeah, I knew I should have paid attention here. Like, they do a really good job of doing that, which is a fun staple of a murder mystery that I think they've really found a good formula that works for them in a genre like this, that, they find different creative ways to tell these stories, and each of these three have tackled different topics and subjects, and I really got a lot of enjoyment out of this. I think they hit the nail on the head again with a really well done story on this one. I really do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I want to rewatch it too for a lot of Easter eggs, because there's some deep cuts with some of the references to different TV shows and films of the past, and there's just so many different nods and winks and references to a lot of stuff. And one of my favorites part of this still is that in the last one, in Glass Onion, there was a lot of jokes and references to Jeremy Renner as the actor. Like, he's got his own Renning hot sauce, and they poke fun at other aspects of his life in the last one, and now he's a character in the third one. So there's a lot of, like, in-universe jokes. There's even some Big Lebowski jokes that have some ties to the cast as well. So there's a lot of, like, in-jokes at the expense of actors in here, but also not in here, or past projects they've done and other things. So there's just this really neat kind of meta around all of this, because he's just poking fun at so many different things, and so many different references. And I don't know if it was actually a Lord of the Rings reference, but there felt like there was one, because I think it was Josh Brolin's Jefferson Wicks just yelled out, "You shall not pass," or something like that. I'm like, that's got to be a Lord of the Rings. But it's going to be interesting to see exactly where all these references are pulled from, because there's a lot of different references in there.
Yeah, they do a good job of, like, getting things to kind of grab at you and kind of make you pay attention if you're not already doing so. But I like how they keep alluding to these things, and these people keep showing up in future movies. Like, are they teasing who's coming from a potential next Knives Out story? Because, I mean, this is the third one in the series, but there's no real, like, definitive end yet, because with a character like Blanc, he's like a Sherlock Holmes. He's like a character like that you can keep finding ways to bring them back for other films. And as good as this is, like, I know it's not physically taxing on Daniel Craig. Like, he could make several more appearances as this character if they find more creative ways to tell these stories. We'll see if we get a future for Benoit Blanc beyond this. Obviously, like, this was another shining moment for him, man. And it's one that I don't feel like ever really gets potentially stale unless we get just, like, a bad story, which we haven't gotten so far. Like, that's the fun of this genre, is you can keep kind of coming back to it with different stories if they work. Like, you're not trying to tell a continual story with a character like this, like, which is what a lot of, and kind of preluding to what we're going to talk about later with our favorite trilogies, like, when you're trying to tell a cohesive story over the course of several movies versus telling different stories using a similar character, like, I feel like that's much easier to do than it is to try to tell a continuous story throughout the course of 3 films.
I just wonder when he's going to run out of celebrities that he can use in here, because he's packing 10, 12
There's a lot of
big
them.
names in there, because I mean, you had was it Chris Evans and quite a lot of other people in the first one, and you brought in just because, and it's really interesting how they done the story. You know, the first one was more murder mystery in a house in a small town, just kind of doing around this group of people, and then you went with Glass Onion, which was much more bigger about the celebrity and the aspects, and I believe they went onto an island for that one, so you had a different one, and this one went to a small town church, so there are different locations and ways that they can continue doing this for a long time, because yeah, you could really, I mean, you could get deeper into politics and have something that revolves around an election in another town or something. Like there's so many different ways they can continue that on, and I'm all for it, because yeah, just keep giving me Daniel Craig as that character, and
So good.
I'll be happy with it. But yeah, you get a star-studded cast. The only one that I felt was kind of out of place with me was Mila Kunis as the chief of police, because I don't know, I just didn't fully believe her as the chief of police, because once Benoit shows up, he takes over everything, so the police are almost useless in a way, and she's just kind of tagging along, even though she's the chief of police, and it's also, she still looks like she did on that 70s show, so it's kind of just hard to take her almost seriously as a chief of police, just because she's done mostly comedies and she's doing this stuff. She wasn't bad. I just didn't fully believe her as a chief of police.
Yeah, I mean, in these in these kind of murder mystery stuff, the police always seem to take a back seat whenever they are involved, because you got the detective working the case. Everybody's like, "All right, we get it, Blanc," but you have they were a little bit more involved in this one, because as it seems like, to get a little spoilery in it, like when he seems to be at a crossroads of trying to explain exactly what's going on, because this all revolves around what's a quote-unquote impossible case, right? An impossible situation, an impossible crime that they're trying to solve, because at the end of the day, Benoit Blanc believes the truth is the truth, and there's nothing that can stop you from getting to the truth, like there's always an explanation for something. So it's about this obsession with an impossible crime that he's trying to solve, and you have the police very much involved in that when, he's hitting these roadblocks in his investigation. It's like, he's like, there's got to be something. And the cops are like, well, it's definitely this. Like they have a little bit more of a role to play in this situation than they typically would. But yeah, in a lot of parts, and these cops are just completely useless to the story, but they provide some good fodder in here. I think they do a good job of that. But yeah, Mila Kunis, that role could have been played by literally anybody, but it was still cool to see her in a role like that, because we love Mila Kunis as an actress. But yeah, it was one of those, like, that role could have really gone to just about anybody, but it was cool they got her to do it.
Yeah, and like I said, the story unfolds really well. They do the mystery part really well there, because like I said, you're unfolding multiple different angles, because you have, is this actually an impossible case for Benoit? Is he actually not certain, or is this part of his game? And
Right.
what exactly is going on with this group that is just way too intensely following Jefferson Wicks? And what is his story and everything that's going on with him? And then you have, Father Judd, and exactly what kind of person and a character he is, because we get that he's a new pastor, and he's trying to right wrongs from his youth and his past and stuff, and it really marries everything together really well. Like I said, there's a ton of political commentary, a ton of religious commentary, because as we mentioned, Benoit is an atheist. You're dealing with a church that has overly religious people, so I mean, it's basically hitting every angle of the religious, of those that are just there for maybe a personal gain, or there for a monetary gain, or those who are trying to use the church for their own careers and things like that, but also the ones that are using the church almost as a cult. And there's so many different angles and layers it does with it, that it could have probably been trimmed maybe 10-15 minutes, but I don't think what it did, that the pacing wasn't bad. There just could have been a little bit of tightening that they could have done with it, because it is almost 2.5 hours. But I didn't mind, because I was having so much fun with it, especially towards the end when Benoit gets up on the pastor's stand to get everyone's attention, is just yelling at him and everything else. Is the over-the-topness of that character is just so much fun. Like, I feel like Daniel Craig is just having an enormous amount of fun doing these movies. And yeah, I would love to continue seeing these into 4, 5, 6, as long as they can find a good story and keep writing good mystery, because that first time that it gets a story out there where it's just not as strong is pretty much going to be the end of it. I don't think they could probably rebound from it. But so far, I think they've done a solid job with the 3 films and the Knives Out trilogy so far.
Yeah, each one of these on its own merits are a ton of fun. And like I said, this is just one of those genres that as long as you can continue to tell a good story, that character can be dropped into any situation. And I love his way of trying to get to the truth and how it slightly changes in every story, because he's essentially the smartest guy in every room, and he knows he is. But sometimes he plays some of these games, and you almost wonder if it's going to burn him at some point. And I'm kind of wondering if they take a story in that direction where he might actually get put in more real, legitimate danger than he's in. Because he finds himself in some precarious situations, especially in the second one, I think was more precarious for him than being in any real danger in this one, just because of the situation. But I'd almost like to see it go to that level for him where he finds himself in a real pickle that he's got to not only get out of, but solve a mystery at the same time.
Or where everything points to him being the killer and he's got to unravel his own mystery.
Right. And that could be a fun story to tell. And we'll see if they eventually go that route. But yeah, man, these films are just fun, man. I like them. They're not perfect movies by any stretch, but these are just good. Sit down, watch, figure out who did it, and like just go on the journey that they go on, because these are just a lot of fun. And this one is no different. This one had more darker tones to it than the other two, which I appreciated it taking a little bit more of a darker tone, but there's still plenty of levity and absurdness in this that I was not only looking at things seriously, but laughing and having a good time watching it, which I think brought a lot of balance to this movie. I feel like this movie was probably the most balanced of the 3 as far as tone and going serious when it needs to, but also like just lightening it up with some really funny stuff in the middle as well. Like they do a good job of balancing that here.
Yeah, and it definitely had a few surprises that I didn't exactly see coming more at the end, and of how they handled a few situations and how they got there. But it made sense how it did. And plus, also like the way he balances having something really dark and then hitting you right away with humor just works so well, because there are some like there's a death, but then the next scene is something very humorous with the body silly, or something else like very silly. Like it can get crass with some of its humor. It can get really almost slapsticky with some of its humor, but it works and it feels, because you have everybody committing. Like Glenn Close just commits so hard to being this over-the-top church lady, and you have Josh Brolin really committing to being this guy, that almost really pompous type of pastor who is so full of himself and believes his own message so much that like he can do no wrong, and he's just got that arrogant cockiness to him that Brolin plays so really well, because he feels threatened by Father Judd coming to his church, like, this is my church, not your this is mine, you're not taking over, this is my place. And it really, once they start unraveling it gets like really fun and intense, that you're just trying to figure out. Like, that's where I really like. It's one of those moments where, all right, I'm leaning forward. Let's pay attention to see what clues I got right and what I got wrong. And I do feel like I got a lot of it right. Few things I didn't see and I got wrong, because it does, like I said, a well-balanced murder mystery is going to make you feel like everyone can do it. And it's trying to distract you from who it is in the end, but you're not going to perfectly ever be able to not have that person be, the suspect to somebody. But it was balanced so really well of making sure that you had fun while also really trying to just crank your brain to try to, well, now they show this, so that means this person can't do it. Or is there some deeper layer to that really gets it? And I think through all 3, Rian Johnson has done a really good job of balancing that twist aspect and keeping you on your toes. That I'm going to give you clues to let you know who it is. That if on a second rewatch you come back, oh yeah, that all makes sense or this, and this. But on the first watch, it's really entertaining and really gets you to really think about every element of this story and what's going on. Even like a really funny part, but I didn't see something in it at first, like when they go into a bar and Benoit is tilting a picture down, like, do you see this? And there's some details in that I didn't see right away because it's a really quick scene, but it's kind of a little silly and goofy, while also getting you to look at, well, you're looking here while you should be looking somewhere else, and it's really well crafted.
Yeah, for sure, and that's what makes these fun. I do want to highlight what I think, who I think probably gives the best performance in the film. Like, it's easy to say Daniel Craig gives like the best, but I really think the Father Judd character like has like the best, because he's kind of the central character of the story here. It's all about him trying to convince, basically, for lack of a better term, to kind of expose a little bit of the plot throughout it. Father Judd is kind of like the central suspect at the beginning, that everybody thinks it's him, but it's laid out very obviously that it's not, but it could be.
But it's not.
But it's not. But it is. But it could be. And that's kind of, they do have a fun job of playing with that. But Father Judd has like the neatest and best done story arc, and I think Josh O'Connor did a great job as Father Judd in this, kind of playing with that dynamic of, I'm an innocent man, but am I an innocent man? And then playing with the whole like trying to make amends for the wrongs he's done in the past, and why he believes his true calling is to be a preacher, and the kind of the personal story arc that he goes on throughout this is a really well done through, like a through line throughout the entire story that I think they do a really good job of navigating, while also trying to solve a murder mystery at the same time. Like, I think Father Judd was a phenomenal character in this movie.
Yeah, he was really solid and had the most layers to him, because you said he has a past that he's dealing with, and he has some issues that got him sent to this church, and then he's got his own issues with how Father Wicks is doing everything, or Monsieur, or whatever they called him, I forget. Monsignor Wicks, of what they called him, because as everyone has pointed out, I'm the butcher of everything. So, but it's really an interesting dynamic, because he's kind of our narrator for most of it too, and there's a reason why that's revealed throughout this film, of why he's the narrator. But he is a central character. He is the main, who has the kind of the most layers and shifts and changes. And you get Benoit basically demands that he comes along with the investigation, because he's still suspicious of him, but he's trying to see what he can get out of him as they're going, like going to the morgue to look at the body, and going here and going there and talking to distant people. And there's even like a really fun scene with Benoit and Judd, who's calling this heavy equipment company, because there's only one way that the crypt to the grandfather can be open, and that's where, you know, Jefferson Wicks is going to be placed and everything. And they're trying to find out, well, someone actually ordered this to be open. They showed up like way too quickly to open up this crypt after Wicks died, and just talking to this woman who refuses to stop talking over Father Judd. And you can see that kind of back and forth of, okay, I'm a pastor, I'm a father, I'm trying to have patience, and I'm trying to be kind and nice and talk to this woman, but also the kind of old Judd, like, just want to tell this woman to shut up so I can talk and speak, because I'm trying to get something out of her, but she just will not stop talking over me. And it was just a really interesting scene. You just got Daniel Craig doing different faces and other stuff in the background, but it was just a really just kind of fun, silly scene that they did there.
Yeah, just like get to the point, because he's like, get it out. What do we got? We gotta go. It was a really fun back and forth. Another funny scene that like really made me laugh. Just the timing of it was, they had the heartfelt moment back at the place where he was staying. Obviously, had this really fun, and this whole through line throughout a lot of it is the father hasn't slept in like 3 days or whatever. Like it's intense, and then they finally have this like warm, heart touching moment, and then like literally 2 seconds after Benoit says something, you just hear him snoring, and you cut over to him, and he's just like passed out. It was really, I don't know. That scene made me chuckle, because they're like, oh, we finally got this really cool moment between them, and then he finally passes out. And it was just, I don't know. The timing of it was just silly, and I appreciate things like that. And that was a ton of fun. But yeah, this story, man, good times. I love this movie. Like, this is one I definitely want to watch multiple times for sure, and I think that'll affect how I grade it.
It made me want to go back and watch all of them again, and go from 1, 2, and 3, and just kind of watch them in order, which you don't have to, because we said they're
individual stories.
They're connected by Benoit, but they're not stories that you do not have to see Glass Onion. You do not have to see the first Knives Out film to understand anything going in here. it's set up in that brilliant way of that if you've watched the other two, then you know the silly exploits that Benoit goes through and the style and how he handles things. But if it's your first time ever watching one of these, films, you can dive right into it without feeling like you're missing a thing at all. So it's really brilliant how he's created this Knives Out universe that's connected but disconnected so much that you don't have to watch any of the others to know what's going on. And I have to give big props to that because, it's once I finish it, like I want to go back and watch the other two and then probably rewatch the third one after I've watched the other two because they are so different but very similar in the styles and the way they lead things. And I even watched some behind the scenes stuff of how they did stuff. And you always look at movies of being just these spectacular things of where everything is just kind of just over the top and done with so much money and everything else. And you're like, well, yeah, we had a scene where we needed a red light to be shining on a character, so I just took some like plexiglass or transparent red pieces and held them up over the church window until we got the angle, and then we just taped them onto the window. And like just such a simple
practical stuff,
simple practical thing, but it had a really big impact on those scenes because you're trying to look at this character, this harlot character, as something, and that lighting dynamically changed it. But it was such a simple of just taping a couple translucent red pieces up on a window just to get that lighting right. And it's that just fun practical way of doing things because we are in a time of AI and over CGIing things where we don't need CGI, and it's really fun to have a practical murder mystery. Because as you said, we don't really have. You have these, and you have the Agatha Christie ones, such as the Death on the Nile, Death on the Orient.
The Kenneth Branagh films. Yeah,
you basically have those two.
Yeah,
and that's kind of all the murder mystery have. So it's been a little bit since the Agatha Christie side. I think it's been 2, maybe 3 years since we got the last one on that, I believe.
It may have been 2 years now, but it's been fairly recently.
Well, I guess it was because the last one, the Death in Venice, was a little bit different than the other two. So that one kind of didn't feel like it was in the same wheelhouse as the Death on the Orient and the Death on the Nile. So I kind of forget about that one coming out just because it was so almost went to a horror mystery
very much
for that, which we also had a pain in the butt time watching that because of a grandma and her son who decided to sit right next to us in an empty theater.
Right. And go back in our archives and listen to us talk about that talk about that film. But this is good, man. I think it fits in well, and I think it's going to kind of transition well when we eventually start talking about our greatest film trilogies of all time. I think this is a really solid one, and on its own merit, the fact that they don't have to be interconnected, I think works in a genre like this. Like I said before, like you don't have to have seen the other two films to get enjoyment out of this. It has no real bearing on this story at all whatsoever, and I kind of appreciate that. It's like an old school episodic, like you can connect them if you want to, but you don't have to kind of enjoy it. And I like the approach that they've taken with this so far. Like, I'm excited if they do a fourth one. I really hope they do. I haven't really looked to see if there's any plans for it yet.
I think he said he had plans for like a fourth and a fifth, potentially.
Love it. Give them to me. I'm excited for it. Bring them on. I've had a lot of fun with these so far.
Yeah, so Wake Up Dead Man and Knives Out Mystery is a really fun murder mystery. It's a third in this trilogy, but they're not connected other than by Benoit. Like, you don't have to watch the other two to get enjoyment out of this. I think it was smartly written. You have such a huge cast with Josh Brolin, Josh O'Connor. You have Glenn Close. You have Jeremy Renner. You have Mila Kunis. You have Kerry Washington. Like, a laundry list of big names that they've done in this. And I think everyone played their parts well. The story was intriguing and interesting. It had me hooked all the way throughout. I really enjoyed what they did with this film, and I'm giving it an 8.5. I think it was a ton of fun. Like, there was a few nitpicky things I could get of some characters not really fitting their roles. It was mainly one with that, and a few other little nitpicky things. But overall, like, I can't see anything really bad about this. I just had a ton of fun. I'm really enjoying these murder mystery films, and I do hope that we get to see more.
I'm giving it a 9. I'm right in that same wheelhouse as you. Like, it's one of my favorites. I think after my initial takeaway from these, it might be my favorite of the 3 so far, and that's saying a lot considering how much I like the first 2. But I think this might be my favorite of the 3. Like, I really like the story, the different dynamics that they play with in this. Like, I think they've really found their footing in how they want to tell these stories, and I think they did a good job of it. It is a little bit of a long film, but the other films are a little bit longer too. But they don't feel like they're wasting any time really in these because they keep moving through the different beats of the story, and I really like the whole togetherness of it. Is it a perfect film? No, but like it's still just a ton of fun, high rewatchability for me. That's always going to score a film a little bit better for me, and I'm putting it right there at a 9. I think the performances are all good. The Father Judd story was really awesome, and you give me Daniel Craig with a goofy Southern accent, I'm here for it all day because he pulls it off so well. Like, it's so cartoonish and over the top that it works in a charming way for him, and I'm here for it every time. Just keep telling these stories like this, and you got a fan in me. This was one I had a lot of fun watching.
Even though there's great performances by everyone in all 3 of these films, it's well worth the watch. Any of them for Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc. He is just so entertaining and charming and over the top and silly. Because I even told you, like, it's Foghorn Leghorn mixed with which Foghorn Leghorn was an inspiration for it. The lawyer chicken from Futurama. Right. Like, I kept hearing him in there, but that's definitely both of them are inspired by Foghorn Leghorn. But it's just so over the top with his. But it just feels like he's having so much fun, and which allows you to have so much fun with his character because he seems to be enjoying it. But you also get a little bit of emotion out of him in this film as well that he's trying to, figure out. And is he really stuck on an impossible case, or is he playing it up and hamming it up? And he's kind of almost a little more subtle with the way he does things in here until he really starts unraveling it because it has an underlying layer that has to do with religion and repentance and all that stuff that plays an importance of how he solves this case. So he's even solving the cases. Each one is solved a little bit differently than the other.
Yeah, they have to be, and that's what keeps the stories intriguing and keeps you coming back for more, right? It's not the exact same formula. It follows certain specific beats similarly, but you're getting a different story every time, and that's what I want to see from these films. Like, they have their own unique identity. Like we said, you don't have to have seen the first 2 to get some enjoyment out of this. I will say, now that we've gotten 3 of these, my favorite individual character in all of these, outside of Benoit Blanc, I really like the Father Judd character, but for whatever reason, it's still always going to be, in my opinion, Chris Evans from the first film. So good, such a departure from like the clean-cut all-American Captain America character that he's played, and he just plays just like a real jerk in that film. And he does it so well. Like, it's still my favorite individual performance of these 3 movies, but I wanted to give a little extra love to Chris Evans for that one because he was so good in the first one.
Yeah, I think that's really great because he was still, heavy in the MCU, and you saw him as, Captain America through all that, and he got to play a real jerk, and it was kind of the same thing with Daniel Craig. You were so used to seeing him as Bond and not really doing too much outside of the dark and serious, and you get him over the top. So that combination of having Chris Evans be a jerk and, Daniel Craig being the over the top Louisiana Southern drawl talking type of detective just worked so well. And that was Chris Evans was so much fun on that first one. But you don't quite get as much of that kind of performance that Chris Evans gave in this one, but everything, it fits to the story it's trying to tell because, as we said, this is a small town, small church, over the top type of religious characters, and it's playing up to that type of setting. Like, it's not trying to include somebody who really doesn't fit in this world. Everything, like, the over-the-topness is tied to the church and to the religion and to the politics and everything else. And so it's forming all those characters that you see and you have present are there because they have something that has to do with this church and has to do with this town and area. So like the characters are well formed to the story that's being told, and that's what I think all 3 of them have been done so well because even with the second one being a little more over the top with the celebrities and that type of big glass house and everything else and the mystery, like it was still contained in its own little bubble so well with how everyone was. And he's like I said, you've created a trilogy that is, each one is in its own bubble, but they work so well. Even if I go through and I watch all 3, I'm going to feel really fun and good about it. But like I said, you could watch these in any order at any time, and it doesn't really have that importance that well, what if I watched 2, 1, and 3, or 3, 2, and 1, or 3, 1, and 2? It doesn't really matter.
Right.
And that's kind of the brilliance of it. Like, you can enjoy each one individually, but enjoy the exploits of Benoit as a whole, that he's had this really interesting, crazy journey through these first 3 films. But they're important to him, but it's like, well, I'm moving on. It's all about this case right now. I'm not keeping anything about the past going. It's about the presence of being where I am to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, and that's what makes them work so well. You can watch Wake Up Dead Man and all the other Knives Out films on Netflix right now. Go check them out. Come to our YouTube comments. Come to our Discord. Let us know what you thought of the movie. Check these films out. They're well worth your time. A ton of fun. We think you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of them. And yeah, I think it's a worthy addition to our trilogy list now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how, now that we have this as a trilogy, where does it sit and where does it lay within everything? But it was such a fun film. We are now partnered with Dubby Energy. Dubby is a clean energy drink to give you focus with no crash or jitters like other energy drinks.
Dubby contains vitamins, amino acids, and 150 milligrams of caffeine. It also features 0 calories, no sugar, no fillers, and no artificial dyes.
From Dragonade and S'mores to Push and Punch and Galaxy Grenade, Dubby has a wide range of flavors for you to choose from.
Use code WBTP to save 10% off your Dubby Energy orders, and look for a direct link in the audio and video descriptions. Let's talk about some of the greatest film trilogies of all time. Now, we have a list that you and I have kind of compiled of some of our favorite trilogies, some of them that we feel are, perfect in some ways. Spoiler alert, if you've watched any episode of this podcast, you can kind of feel which one we feel is probably the most perfect. But we could talk about some that are like really good, some near misses, some that had potential to be but couldn't quite stick the ending, and some of them that are just kind of a mixed bag because there's so many different examples of trilogies that get it right, and some that had potential but kind of faltered, or some that just, we got 3 films and it was kind of a mixed bag. There's a lot of criteria into what makes a good film trilogy, but we can kind of start it off with some honorable mentions that I think you and I both kind of agree on. The films like the Austin Powers trilogy, that we feel like the first film is incredible, but it got a little more ridiculous and over the top as it went on. They're still funny movies, but they're not what we consider all-time greats necessarily, but there's so many other like honorable mentions that we could think of. And what are some of the ones that you think of when you think of trilogies that are good but didn't quite necessarily get to where we were hoping they would get for 3 films?
You as you mentioned Austin Powers, it's so fun and silly and over the top. It's one of Mike Myers' biggest roles that he's done other than doing Shrek, which I kind of put in here with Shrek being an honorable mention because the first 3 can be really solid, but it does have a 4th film that's technically the end of it, which I think it was a little lesser than the first 3. So that one's a hard one to call a trilogy because it's technically ends with the 4th one, but now they're doing a 5th one. Right. But if you want to look at the first 3, it kind of does give a almost well-rounded story between those 3. But Austin Powers is great. I will throw in kind of with Austin Powers with the original Naked Gun trilogy because Leslie Nielsen just kind of, he perfected that deadpan, serious, comedic just performance that was just so fantastic. Like he owned that role, even though we enjoyed the new one, and you can go back in our archives to see what we thought about that with bringing in someone new but also continuing it on. But Leslie Nielsen was just so, I mean, they're not perfect, the jokes are very dated, that it has hits or misses in here, and that's kind of what these are. They have some misses and problems, or they're fun and enjoyable, but the cinematography or the writing or other things like that just don't match up to some others in there, but they're fun and enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could throw in another trilogy, and I know I'm going to get some of my friends that are going to rip me for this, but I kind of would throw Rush Hour into that category as well. Rush Hour 1 and 2, absolutely brilliant films. The third one was just kind of okay. Like, not as good as the first 2. The first 2 are probably incredibly iconic classical comedy, buddy cop comedy films that were incredible, quotable, some much fun. I still quote some of those movies to this day. You could throw a film franchise in like that. I know with it being like Christmassy and the holidays right now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Santa Claus. Like the Santa Claus, the first one, is one of my favorite Christmas movies.
It's a near perfect Christmas movie.
Yeah, it's an amazing Christmas movie. Still very quotable. The second and the third one, definitely not up to par with the first one. And those are the kind of things that we're talking about when it comes to like honorable mentions of things that could have been good, but started off incredibly. Like that first Santa Claus film is still and will always be in my holiday rotation. But the second and third ones are, especially the third one, is definitely one that I didn't think was nearly up to par with the first one, and even the second one, which was still a step down from the first one, but still an enjoyable movie. Like I still throw that on occasionally at Christmas too.
Because I enjoyed the plot of the second one, of that he needs to find a Mrs. Claus, but you throw in with like the second and third one, you have the fake Santa who's taking over the North Pole with the, creating clones of himself. And then you get Jack Frost. As much as I love Martin Short, but the Jack Frost whole storyline with that was a little, it just went overly hammy and corny with that. It also did continue with the series, which I thought the series was pretty solid. We don't know if that series is over with yet.
Correct.
They said Tim Allen's filming schedule has been a little crazy with all of his different shows and stuff, so there might still be another. So that one's it did end at 3, but then it got the continuation many years later with the series and stuff. But yeah, that one was a lot of fun. I might get a little flack for this one being in an honorable mention. Is a Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy, like Hot Fuzz, The World's End, and Shaun of the Dead. I love Shaun of the Dead. It's one of my favorite films and stuff. I'm not as big of a fan of the other two. Like, I think they have their moments, and they have some good things about them, but I don't think their quality and storytelling and everything else matches up to what Shaun of the Dead was.
Yeah, Shaun of the Dead was absolutely brilliant. One of my favorite movies ever made too. Hot Fuzz, I could hit or miss on Hot Fuzz. Hot Fuzz, in my opinion, is like an okay film. Like it does. It has its funny moments and it has its good moments in there. I was not the biggest fan of The World's End, honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you. But Shaun of the Dead, absolutely brilliant, and that's kind of what we're talking about here with honorable mentions. But we can kind of move into some of the ones that we feel were definitely excellent films. They may not be S tier, but they're probably A tier trilogies, and films that, for the most part, the quality was high on for all three films, and maybe have a little bit of a dip in quality in one or two of them, but overall really excellent trilogies. And I'd be remiss if I didn't start out with one of my personal favorite trilogies of all time, which is the Captain America films. Like, I am still to this day consider Captain America: The Winter Soldier as my personal favorite MCU movie, and it's like the least comic booky kind of movie of any movie that they've made in the MCU, but I think it was so well written, well paced, well done, like an incredible film. The first one was, in my opinion, the best of the OG, like original Phase 1 Marvel superhero movies. I liked it better than Iron Man 1. Iron Man 1 was really good, but I liked it better. And then Civil War was a precursor to what we got with the like Endgame and more battling superheroes kind of thing, where it felt like a beefed up version of the Avengers as well, where you had so many characters involved in a story that could have gone off the rails very quickly and not been good, but they really stuck the landing on it. I love the Captain America trilogy of films.
Yeah, I do as well, and it's one that's kind of hard and difficult because it's all wrapped up within the MCU of
Correct.
this overarching storyline. And yeah, as you said, the first one is quite different than anything else that they really did in the MCU, because you're going back into the World Wars and you're dealing with the classic costumes, and you're dealing with Red Skull, but it just had this different feeling to it because it's set in the past and done so differently. And then you bring him back in the Winter Soldier, which still to me has the greatest villain introduction and suit. Like that first Winter Soldier suit and look with
Incredible.
Sebastian Stan just looked menacing and incredible. I think that's the best they've probably made a villain and a character look, was when they introduced the Winter Soldier into that. And it was such a fun military espionage film. And then, Civil War is a difficult one because it's enjoyable, but you're trying to take a pretty big storyline with the Civil War storyline and make it a Captain America film, which he's very important to it. Yeah. But you're doing all that in a single film as a third film, and there's some hit or misses in that.
Of course.
But you also have a fourth Captain America film, which didn't perform very well, which was without Chris Evans. So this is the Chris Evans Captain America trilogy in that. But overall, it was a lot of fun. I'm going to continue in the comic book realm, and I'm going to speak of two because they both kind of came out at the same time and had the kind of the same issues in the end. And that's Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy and the X-Men trilogy. So both of them had really solid first films that came out, introduced us to Tobey Maguire, gave us Hugh Jackman, as Wolverine, gave us a really good start, although Toad and Sabretooth weren't done as well in the first X-Men film. But both of them had sequels that were just far and away better than almost anything else. Like Spider-Man 2 and X-Men 2 were considered for the longest time being the two greatest sequels for comic books and some of the best sequels of all time. And they both really fell off on the third one. Like The Last Stand for X-Men and Spider-Man 3, like Spider-Man 3 is almost a tale of two different movies. You had the darker, more serious Sandman story, and then you had the over-the-top Goblin and Venom story, and then just they tried to condense and kind of put a little bit of the Dark Phoenix and a few other things in The Last Stand, and it just felt kind of phoned in. Like they both started off okay, incredible second films, and just both fell off on the third.
Yeah, I'm a little more forgiving of the Sam Raimi trilogy. Going back and watching it now, like I have a little bit more of an appreciation. I was not the big fan of the third one, honestly, when it came out. I viscerally hated that film for a long time, and I've gone back and I think I appreciate it a little bit more, like in the last couple of years, having given that film another chance. Like it's not as bad as I remember it being, but still a weaker entry. Because I agree with you, Spider-Man 2 was a phenomenal film, and had that been the kickoff of Spider-Man, would have been incredible as well. Because the first Spider-Man was okay, like it was a solid film, like you said, but that second one was incredible and amazing story. The X-Men, I would agree as well. The third. The Last Stand was all right. It was fine, but X2, X-Men United was an incredible movie as well. Like a ton of fun. That was kind of the X-Men in their real element. Still wish we could have gotten the more comic book accurate things, which they've poked fun of in recent years, but definitely one that I feel could have really carried the entire trilogy, really, because it was such a good movie on its own. But yeah, these are two good examples of ones that started off well and hit a peak midway and definitely fell off on the third ones that were still overall really solid trilogies, and I think that as a whole it puts it up in that upper tier as far as like total of films, because the misses aren't as bad as some of the others that we mentioned before that were significantly worse third films, especially because it's so hard to nail that third one, and when we get to our perfect one, we'll see why we feel like it's perfect as well, because you do have that incredible landing that you stick at the end, which could, in some cases, I would even argue is the best film of the three. Like, it's so hard to get that out of a trilogy when you're building a continuous story like that. But these are all really solid examples so far, for sure.
Yeah, Spider-Man 2 was one of the first ones that gave me the big chill moment in theaters when it came to like these big action continuous stories, because when MJ finally sees the tattered in the cut open suit of Peter Parker as Spider-Man, and you get that realization that they lock eyes and she knows now that he's Peter, while also he's trying to save the day, and you just see that he's straining to save, but when he finally sees that she sees him for who he is and he doesn't kind of have to hide that he's Spider-Man anymore, it was such a perfect moment done in that film. But because you also had Doc Ock was done so well of bringing that to dramatic, but also you got a little bit of the campy, almost Evil Dead type of horror because of when he's getting operated on and stuff like that. But Doc Ock was one of the better villains done in comic books, because they took it, Alfred Molina is an incredible actor, and he took it very seriously, and it was just so really done. But that, like, we've both talked about the chills we got in Endgame of, like, the Mjolnir flying to Captain America and everything, getting chills with that. The Spider-Man 2 was that first comic book chills moment I got, because I knew the comics and I knew that MJ eventually finds out, but it was just such a well-done timing of when MJ sees Peter as Spider-Man that is really well done in that. And so I do put the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy a little bit above the X-Men trilogy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that was one that really helped prove that comic book superhero movies could work, really, because it wasn't, if you think back to that time, if you were around, back when those were really popular, that was almost unheard of. Like comic book properties were not popular films at all. It was still considered like a very niche, very nerdy thing to kind of be into, and it was kind of something that was untouched until you got around to like the successful of like a Spider-Man trilogy, and when you got to do the X-Men, even like it was still considered a very niche thing. And I'd be remiss if we talked about comic books if we didn't talk about one of the sleeper hit trilogies that was ever made, one that nobody really saw coming until we got an absolutely incredible first movie out of it, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy. Like we got three really good movies. The second one, some people would argue, is better than the first one. I think it's a little bit of a step down from the first one, but the third one is another really solid entry too. That's not a perfect movie by any means. You go back in our archives and see what we thought about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but it was one that definitely hit across all three films. And the first one was just, man, it took everybody by surprise with how popular it was, because you had the perfect mix of these heroes that not a lot of people were familiar with, but had an incredible soundtrack. And we talk all the time about how important music can be to a film's success. And I think without the incredible soundtrack that was laid with it and the incredible work that James Gunn did, creating this world that survived three films and did very well with all three of them, I think it's one that absolutely deserves to be on the list.
Yeah, fantastic mix of action, humor, and perfectly timed music. Yeah. In there, that you're doing a futuristic space trilogy here that's operating within the MCU but kind of outside of it on its own thing, that it's in there but it's outside of it. And you've got music from the 60s, 70s, 80s that's the main soundtrack, which could be a really big issue because, you know, you're in the 2000s here and those are classic songs now and that everyone's looking at, and it could have been a big miss, but everything just works so perfectly with the scenes and where they put it, and even had using outtakes and gags in the film, because I just still remember in that first film when he's holding up the container that holds one of the Infinity Stones and he drops it and he just stands up and he holds it back up to him. That was a gag. Like Chris accidentally dropped it and he just kept in the scene, and it just worked so well that he really became Star-Lord and became that character. And of course everyone loved the dark humor with Groot, like he's stabbing people with his extended arm on the ship, and then he just looks at everybody and smiles like, hey, I did good, like a little puppy, like, hey, I did good, right? But yeah, it works so well. There's another one I want to make sure we talk about here because I love it. It's not as revered as a lot of other trilogies, and here's the Bourne trilogy. I really loved Matt Damon in this role, like seeing him as an action star, seeing him do the kind of stuff he did in there, and the shaky cam, handheld cam of it, the storytelling, the action. I think it was a really solid trilogy. Of course, they continued it by doing another one with Jeremy Renner, and then they brought Matt Damon back to do Bourne to kind of wrap that up in a way. But the first three were such a really good spy, espionage, action, such great like vehicle chase scenes and just hand-to-hand combat, and it was just done so really well. There's some of my favorite films. Like, not a lot of people are as big on it. I know it didn't stick as close to the books as some people wanted to do, but I think what they gave us in those first three, and I'm not hating on the next two, I really enjoyed them as well, but there was something special to me about those first three.
Yeah, and the first Bourne film was just groundbreaking at the time. Like, it was such a cool, well done story, and it spawned some really classic films around it. Like, those got popular for a reason. They made a ton of money. Like, those films did really well commercially. They did it with a guy like Matt Damon, who nobody suspected would have been an action star, and kind of made him one for those films. And I want to use the Matt Damon connection to kind of tie to the last one I wanted to mention in this category, and that's the Ocean's trilogy. You know, Ocean's 11, 12, and 13. Ocean's 11 is in my opinion, a brilliant film as well. It takes kind of this ensemble cast of huge name Hollywood actors and throws them all into a film, and something that you wouldn't think would work well, it works well. I mean, you've got George Clooney, you've got Brad Pitt, you've got Matt Damon, you've got a lot of big name actors.
Bernie Mac.
Yeah, like attached to this film. Rest in peace to the legend Bernie Mac. Like, incredible cast for this film, and spawned off two successful sequels and kind of a reboot with the Ocean's 8 with the all-female version too. Like that original trilogy, in my opinion, were really solid movies, and some that don't always get talked about as like an incredible trilogy, but one that, you know, the two spinoffs on it were really solid too. I think those were really well done films that worked together very well and were very commercially successful as well in their own right, and it worked more than I thought they would when you talk about throwing an ensemble. Because sometimes when you get those ensemble films, you never know what kind of a mixed bag you're going to get. But those worked really well with the way those were shot and done. I had a blast watching all three of those.
I love the Ocean's films. You got Brad Pitt eating throughout, and
So
having
good.
that be a gag, and you've got just so many huge names that appear throughout here. I like the Ocean's 8 spinoff that they did with the women. It wasn't as good as it was. There's such a chemistry between those guys that really works so well. They're potentially gearing up to do an Ocean's 14. Of course, we've lost several members of the team now, so it's going to be really interesting to how they do that. I do want to touch on one more before we move on to our next section, because we just got done reviewing the third in the trilogy. I'm putting the Knives Out trilogy into the excellent area here because I feel like all three were so much fun. They're so interesting. They're so different because we don't really have that many murder mystery shows or films or anything going on anymore. So it's kind of a niche type of films, but I think they did such an incredible job with, as Oceans did, of taking stacked cast and making no one ever really feel like they're overshadowing anybody else, that the story, the mystery, all that is the main star of these films, and that they're able to use these brilliant actors to make that story shine.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Like what we talked about in our review is like you don't have it's one of those brilliant trilogies that doesn't have to be interconnected to work. And obviously we hope they continue making more of those films as we talked about, but individually on their own are all really, really good, really solid films that we both got a lot of enjoyment out of watching. And it's centered around a character that's telling several different stories that don't have to be interconnected, but they work. They work so well. And it's one that I would love to take kind of a winter day here soon and just watch all three of them together, like you mentioned. Just kind of just take a day and watch them all and see what I feel about it. But yeah, definitely worthy of an entry onto this. Definitely an A-tier trilogy, I would say, because all three films individually stand up really well, and they happen to be connected to the same character and actor. So I think it fits in this. I think it fits in this category really well.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Really enjoyed it. It's not over with yet, so it's one of those. Well, you consider the first three trilogy, even though they're not connected, even though we're potentially getting 4 and 5. But right now, it's a trilogy, and it belongs in there. But I want to move us on to ones that should have been perfect. We all know that there are films out there that they nail the first, they nail the second, but they just drop. Even like the Spider-Mans could be in there. The second one's the strongest. The first and third can be a little weaker, but we do have some trilogies that had a couple brilliant films, and then they just really fell off a cliff with the last one. And I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of kick this one off. What is one of your big ones that really should have been a top tier trilogy, but really that third one really killed it?
I think the immediate example I go to is comparing it to one that we consider to be the perfect trilogy, and that's The Hobbit. I would be remiss if I would say that, because The Hobbit is notorious for being a significant step down from what the brilliance of the original trilogies are, where you essentially take the shortest book and you stretch it out for 3 movies. Like, I think this film, what makes it a potentially perfect trilogy was it could have been an amazing single story. Mm-hmm. You could have made this incredible 3.5 hour, if you wanted to make it that long, film that could have taken all of the best elements from each of the 3 movies, because they're not terrible movies by any stretch. None of them are terrible films, but there's so much stretched out to kind of capitalize on how successful the Lord of the Rings trilogy was. To make this into 3 films was egregious in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But if you could have taken what worked in each of those 3 movies and combined it into one, you could have had a potential masterclass of a film that would have worked so incredibly well. But the fact that they chose to stretch it out for 3 movies is one that it just had so much potential to be a perfect movie that became a trilogy. And that's kind of cheating and bending the rules on this list a little bit, I think. But because of the fact that they told us the story over 3 films, that I really think it's a great example of it, because it's stretching out what could have been an incredible solo film, and it unfortunately became a trilogy, and fans feel about what they feel. I'll still go back and watch them occasionally, but nowhere near the level I would with the original Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah, and it's one that hurts because, and we'll discuss here in a little bit where we see where this falls on our list, is the Lord of the Rings trilogy that Peter Jackson did is incredible.
Right.
And they nailed every aspect. Yes, they don't have every character or every aspect of the book in there.
Which is impossible.
Which is impossible unless it was 376 hours long, especially if you want to put in the other books and the lore and everything.
If they keep doing these extended cuts, they might get to 300 hours.
But yeah, The Hobbit was so disappointing in that fact that, yeah, it's a much smaller book than The Lord of the Rings. It's much more, some will call it a children's book. It's not exactly a children's book, but it's a different type of storytelling than the Lord of the Rings was. Right. And yeah, at max 2 films, but you really could have condensed this into one film because you added the love triangle between elves and dwarves in there, and there's just a lot of stretching and padding and stuff. And when those who are not as familiar with The Hobbit see the more silly nature of some of the stuff, especially like going in the barrels and down the river in the barrels and stuff, that it can take you out of it. But it was so disappointing as a trilogy because it didn't need to be a trilogy. Correct. And you had such a perfect trilogy done with the Lord of the Rings before that this felt like just a huge swing and a miss. That you can blame studio, you can put some blame on Peter Jackson as well, but it didn't work like it. I enjoy them. I'll watch and go back. I haven't watched them with my oldest yet. We finished the Lord of the Rings actually, no, we haven't watched Return of the King yet. So we haven't finished the trilogy yet.
Get on it, man.
So once we finish the trilogy here, which will probably happen over winter break when she's off of school, then we'll probably go into The Hobbit and I'll revisit them because it's been a few years since I revisited them, but that is a good example of just this really shouldn't have been a trilogy. Yeah. So it shouldn't be in the discussion, but because they made it a trilogy, then it should have been more perfect because they nailed the Lord of the Rings so much. And it can show even a master crafter in Peter Jackson of what he did Lord of the Rings couldn't make The Hobbit work as a trilogy. And
that's the element that was most disappointing by it, because you had all of the same players basically at the creative helm of the Lord of the Rings trilogy trying to make this into 3 movies. And like I said, that's what sets it up so much for disappointment for me, because the potential was there. You had all the right people in the room, and it just goes to show how important it is to capture that magic when you get the opportunity to, because you have all the same players and they couldn't have that lightning strike twice like they did with the first one. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm going to lump together 2 of my biggest of what should have been perfect trilogies because they both have the same kind of issue. Sure. That is Alien and Terminator.
Sure. Brilliant.
Alien 1 is such a dark horror. You have that, it's all contained on a ship and you're getting the xenomorphs and seeing these alien creatures for the first time. And it's so incredibly dark and tense and everything else. And then you come in with James Cameron doing Aliens, where he brings more action into it, and it's hailed as one of the greatest sequels ever made. Absolutely. Incredibly well done. You get horror, you get more action, you get a star-studded cast of people in there, and then it's several years later you get Alien 3, and it was just such, compared to how near perfect the first 2 films were, the third one just dropped the ball so hard. You had weird alien creatures were done, the alien dog-like creature. You had just so much that went wrong with that third one that it really killed what should have been a perfect trilogy. Like, we're still getting alien stuff made, but they're still all chasing what they did in Alien 1 and 2. And the other one that I'm putting in with this is Terminator.
Sure.
Terminator 1, dark horror, really well done. And then Terminator 2, Judgment Day, again, one of the greatest sequels ever made. It upped the action. Special effects that still stand up really well with the liquid metal and everything. And it was just, both of those were so, they're different. It's kind of how Alien and Aliens were different. Terminator and Terminator 2 were pretty different because, first one, Arnold is out to kill. And in this one, he's out to protect. And then even farther down the line, we get Terminator 3. And it was just a real disappointment because it felt like lighter and it wasn't as much horror, but the writing and the action and the story and everything was just subpar. So you had both of these, Alien and Terminator, two brilliant first and second films, and they just fell so hard on the third.
Yeah, I agree. And these are two incredible cases, and these are like the classic textbook cases of when people talk about, sequels and their placements among the originals. Like, these are two that are widely quoted as being, if not on par, better than the original films, which for the longest time was such a rare case that these two were kind of the standout examples where you get a bigger budget, but it doesn't sacrifice the quality of the movie, right? So a lot of times when people are like, oh, we're going to blow the budget out on this film, everybody's like, well, you automatically assume it's going to be bad because there's so much more going into it, and you worry about the quality taking a hit because they put so much more money into it. Like, you wonder if it's going to have that same impact and appeal as the original. But these are two incredible examples of that working in its favor, to where you get these two follow-ups to original and creative and incredible films, like, and they take it to the next level with the second one, and then they completely fall off a cliff with the third ones. Like, I couldn't agree more, because Aliens and Terminator 2 are classics, like, in every sense of the word. And then whether it be time might have had something to do with the break that we've had for both of these, but yeah, when they both came up with the next follow-up to that, it was just nowhere near on par with the first two. And that's unfortunate, because like you said, incredible films, and then you try to continue and expand on that world, and it just doesn't work in the same way. And it's unfortunate, because like you said, both two, had they just been a solo and a follow-up film, incredible classics, legacy not tainted, like, it's incredible films. And you unfortunately get the follow-ups that were just severe misses in that case. I couldn't agree more. Those are two incredible examples.
Yeah, you could say for both of them, the third films really tainted the franchise because they were so big of misses. And Terminator continued on trying to do other films to try to better it, and they all had their problems and issues. And Alien has continued on trying to do more outside of this, while Romulus was a solid enough kind of reboot, but not a reboot, because it went back to what made Alien work, but it also didn't do enough of its own stuff to make it unique and original, which made us really curious and excited to see what they do with the follow-up to Romulus, to see if, all right, are we going to get that Aliens type of movie to Romulus, because it feels like, all right, you were almost there to making a spectacular Alien film. Can you nail it with the second one? And even James Cameron is potentially coming back to do another Terminator film here. And Ridley Scott has kind of talked like he's done with Alien. He did Prometheus and he did his prequels, but nothing has really hit in either of these franchises as the first two films did. Like, they're legacies that nothing has been able to live up to.
Yeah, I mean, you do have the TV series Alien Earth that we've talked about, that we've gone and done the review on. Go back in our archives, obviously, and check that out. But yeah, definitely some that have fallen off creatively, like, as time has gone on for some of these, and some of these not so much the case. Like, there's potential to always come back and get better, and we'll see what the follow-up to Romulus does. Like you said, we're hopeful about it, but the jury's still out. We'll see what we get from that. I want to move us, though, into one of my personal favorite film franchises of all time, and I know it's one of yours too, and that's Ninja Turtles. Like, we missed if we didn't talk about Ninja Turtles. Obviously, the first one, absolutely incredible film. We recently just went back and watched the original film in theaters. That was a ton of fun. And then, The Secret of the Ooze is another amazing one as well. Just an incredible follow-up to that. That was more on the lighter-hearted kind of cartoon, led into more of the cartoony nature of the Turtles in the second one. And then you have the unfortunate Turtles in Time that became like a direct-to-video kind of fodder, not the same impact as those. But, man, those first two Turtle films are just so incredibly fun, and ones that I know you and I both will routinely go back and watch, as time continues to move forward. Like, we keep finding ourselves coming back to these films. But, man, what an incredible first two films. And you want to talk about falling hard off a cliff with the third one? This is kind of a really, really good example of that as well, because unfortunately that third one did get that direct to video, which was like the death knell of a franchise back in the day. Like, that would be like your first two being mega hits in the theaters, and you release your third one on a random streaming service just because you wanted to put it out. Like, that's kind of the equivalent of that today.
Yeah, just the 4K cut of seeing Turtles back in theaters and be able to take my kids and watch that with them was incredible. And we've already said they're putting out Secret of the Ooze early in 2026. And, like, we're there. As
we're
soon
going.
as tickets are on sale,
Absolutely.
I'm buying and we're going to. Like, we're not missing seeing Secret of the Ooze because, yeah, the first one was so dark and gritty, matching more of the comic book because, you know, this is taking place right after they had started the animated series, which was more kid-friendly and lighthearted. And the first one was and is still close to being, I think it did get surpassed, but it was for 20-something years the highest grossing independent film of all time. And it was done so well. It was so dark and gritty. And then you bring in Secret of the Ooze because they wanted to be able to make more merchandise and stuff, and they made it more silly and funny. You got Vanilla Ice doing the ninja rap, and you got Tokar and Razor brought in, and you got a bit sillier, but it's still just so much fun, even though you could take or leave Super Shredder because it was such... That's the biggest knock I can give on Secret of the Ooze is that you give us this monstrous Super Shredder, but all he does is knock over a dock and die. Like, you could have done a whole lot more with the Super Shredder, but yeah, it was so beloved and fun. And then, yeah, Turtles in Time, like, all right, we've done 2 films about Shredder and about kind of grounded in the real world. Let's make the third film be about time travel, and let's go back into feudal Japan and do all that stuff. But I think the biggest issue for me with the third film, and it's still kind of a guilty pleasure that I'll go back and watch every now and then, it doesn't get watched as much as the other 2. They didn't use the Jim Henson company anymore for the animatronics. They went with another company, and they were just weird. The turtles look strange and weird, the facial expressions, but they added more, like, they try to add more detail into the suits of, like, more spots and other things, but they just look so funky and weird. And
it's a stark...
It was a stark contrast. Like, the Jim Henson suits for the first 2 were incredible. Some of the best animatronics and suits that you have done, even though it is funny to go back and see the outtakes of, like, in the first one, you can see the actor's face in the mouth of Leonardo Donatello. And you can see some mistakes and issues, and the syncing of the lips are not as good. But yeah, those suits in the third one was the biggest travesty to me. Is just how bad those suits were.
Yeah, and that's a really hard follow for that. We can move into some of our other picks, kind of as like a quick hitter before we move into other categories. I know we'd mentioned we wanted to talk about the Jurassic Park trilogy in particular and how incredible the original Jurassic Park film is one of the greatest films ever made. I don't care who would agree or disagree on that one. Mm-hmm. Honestly, the second one was kind of okay. The Lost World was all right. The third one definitely not as good. And then you can kind of group the Jurassic World trilogy in the same way, where the potential was there, the desire was there, but definitely didn't hit where it needed to hit. I think I would agree with having it on this list.
Oh yeah, Jurassic Park 1, and even Jurassic Park 1 is vastly superior to anything they did with Jurassic World. But the first Jurassic World was a lot of fun. Like, you brought it back in a fun and interesting way. Like, oh, they didn't learn their lesson, and they opened up a new park, and they think they've done everything right, and things go haywire. But yeah, that second and third, when you get into human cloning and you get into the deeper story they tried to tell, they kind of lost you a bit in that. And we technically have a fourth film that's kind of a reboot, but it's still in the Jurassic World type of family that tried to kind of take things back. But it was really strange. But yeah, Jurassic Park is so... And I know I finished reading the Jurassic Park again, and it's vastly different. But looking at just the film, Jurassic Park 1 was so incredible. Sure. And yeah, 2 was just so to me. Like, I love the character of Ian Malcolm and stuff, but making a whole film with him as a central character and about his daughter and going back to the island, have this going on, and then bringing it to the real world, but then really quickly taking it out of it. Like, there was a lot of issues and mistakes. I haven't read that book to see how vastly different it was. But yeah, the third one just kind of like felt like we almost don't know what we want to do, because you get a kid and it's stepfather who were paragliding and end up crash landing on the island, and they have to, Dr. Alan Grant gets tricked to going back to the island, and there's just so many problems with that it could have been a perfect trilogy. Like, even with the second one, like, this is different than the others where the first one is a superior one. The second one took a little bit of a dip, but you could have brought it back up if you really would have nailed that third film, but they just really dropped the ball on that with Jurassic Park. And yeah, Jurassic World, even though I had fun with all of them and my oldest daughter loves them, it did peak at 1 and just kind of slowly went downhill with the other 2. The third one being the weaker of the 3.
Easily the weakest of the 3. I definitely cannot add anything additional to that, what you said. I'd be remiss if I didn't include one of my personal favorite comedies of all time, and it happens to encompass 2 films at least, and that's the Major League trilogy. Like Major League 1 and 2, some of the most quotable films of all time, in my opinion.
Marbles.
Exactly. It's
the original
so
6-7.
Yeah, the original 6-7, exactly right. Send all your hate comments to Brad Covey at we'llbringthepopcorn.com.
Please, kids, stop saying 6-7. I'm tired of hearing it in my household.
But the first 2 films, incredibly iconic. The third one is funny, but it's not like, it doesn't have the same charm as the first 2. The first 2 are absolutely iconic films, and you could have made a more modern, updated version of that if you wanted to. And it definitely hit, because you go to a minor league team instead of a major league team, and there's a fun story in there. It's just nowhere near as quality as the first 2. It's got its funny moments, but the first 2 were all-time classic comedies, and the third one was definitely a sharp step down, and probably could have been left alone at 2 films and would have been a perfect duo of films. But the fact that you threw the third one at us too was just kind of like, man, like, you could have left well enough alone here. It was fun. I'll still go back and occasionally watch the third one, but the first 2, once every year when baseball rolls around and baseball starts up again, I watch those films and I just crack up every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Every baseball season, right before the season's about to kick off, I watch Major League 1 and 2. They're incredible. The second one is better than the first one to me, but both of them are really fantastic. They're very close to each other, but there's just something about Bobby Uecker being the announcer and just
perfect casting.
Everybody fitting their role so well. And it's still to this day, Charlie Sheen is said from a lot of MLB pitchers to have had like the best form and the best look as a film pitcher and stuff. Like, he was up there. They said he could hit 70, 80 miles an hour when he was really hauling back and throwing it. So even though it's a over-the-top comedy film, out of all of the baseball films we had, they still consider him to have one of the best forms as a pitcher in it. And it just, it has so many quotable parts to it. It just has so memorable. And the third one, I honestly couldn't tell you the last time I watched Back to the Minors. Like, it to me doesn't even come close to the first 2. It was okay, but the first 2 are like comedy classics to me. They're just a love for baseball, even though I watch like Field of Dreams and others like that. Like, I have to watch Major League because they were just so much fun.
Yeah, and they're timeless classics. I would be remiss, and I want to make this the last one before we move on to our next category, but I kind of thought of this one in reverse order, where it started off incredibly weak, but man, you want to talk about nailing the ending of the trilogy, and that's the Wolverine trilogy. So if you think of the Wolverine trilogy, we talked about X-Men, but the actual 3 Wolverine-focused and centric movies where you have X-Men Origins Wolverine, not the best film. You get that god-awful version of Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool before he became the iconic version of Deadpool that we all know and love. The Wolverine... okay film. Like, I think it could have been done a little better. It could have been, because when they do the whole some of the scenery they do in Japan is absolutely beautiful. Some of the cinematography and that's really good. The story is a little weaker, but when you talk about one of the best superhero films ever made, I would put Logan up there with just about anything, especially the black and white cut version of it, because the regular in color version is an incredible movie as well, but there's something absolutely beautiful and poetic with the black and white version of Logan, and just the incredible send off for one of the most iconic characters of all time. Of course, it's been undone now with the updated stuff in the MCU and Wolverine, Deadpool and Wolverine and all that, and whatever future involvement he's going to have until he's 90 in the MCU now. But just as a trilogy of standalone films, Logan was the perfect landing to a character's 3-film story arc that I've ever seen. It's such an incredible movie. That movie was a literal gut punch to me by the end of that film, and it's just one of the best, in my opinion, top 3 or 4 superhero movies of all time. I put Logan in there, and I will stand by that until something changes my mind. Yeah,
this is one where it, as you said, it's reverse order. Like, the first one is terrible. Let's just they went so over the top. You got the terrible Deadpool in there. You've got just so much went wrong with that. You've got Taylor Kish showed up as Gambit and then was never seen again. And you only got one. It was really rough. The Wolverine, I enjoy. Yeah. It could have been so much better. They tried to do a much more dark and dramatic storyline, and then they went so over the top with the gigantic Silver Samurai and everything to end that they could have really made that be a really spectacular film. Agreed. They just missed the mark. But yeah, Logan was incredible. Like, as you said, Logan Noir is a fantastic way to watch it, but I still feel like Hugh Jackman and especially Patrick Stewart got
incredible
robbed of awards and nominations and stuff like that. Because as someone who's dealt with two grandmothers who had Alzheimer's and seeing how that disease is, and you're trying to play a super psychic guy who has Alzheimer's and is struggling, and dementia, Alzheimer's, and is struggling with that, I think Patrick Stewart should have been nominated and won awards for his performance in Logan, and Hugh Jackman should have got some stuff too, because that was such a gut punch of a dark, gritty, serious, emotional film that was just it's so crazy, the stark contrast between all three of those. Like, it was like, well, we really failed with the first one. Let's try to do something a little bit more serious, but we really don't know how to stick the landing. And then it's like, all right, let's give James Mangold control of Logan and let him do his thing. And he just absolutely nailed it. But yeah, Logan was incredible. I do have one more I want to throw in here, because it is one of the biggest film franchises that really had issues. Like, I can enjoy the trilogy, but it had a lot of issues, and that's The Matrix.
Sure.
The Matrix was an incredible pop culture sensation. It started the bullet time filming style. It skyrocketed Keanu Reeves back into his career to, who knows, without The Matrix, if John Wick or any of these other films that he's been able to do would have happened, because at that time his career was at a real lull. He wasn't doing a lot of stuff. He had done a lot of romantic comedies and other stuff like that had done okay, but The Matrix was just this pop culture phenomenon. You had the wire fu, you had the special effects, and the intriguing out there sci-fi story that we really hadn't had. But the next two, they dropped the ball to me a lot. Like, they went way too much into CGI, losing that wire fu feeling that everyone loved from the first one, of seeing them run up walls and doing the crazy flips. And I think what really broke a lot of people in the second one was that Neo versus Agent Smith fight, where you have, and again, that's really hard to have that many copies of somebody and not use CG, but it was so jarring that you have Keanu there fighting with the staff or the metal pole and stuff that he's using, and then the very next scene, it's very clearly CG of him with all the CG, and it was just the marriage of CG to live action failed big time in that. But it was also, the story kind of felt like it got a little bit away from them in the second and third one. It almost feels like if they would have just left it at one, it would have been one of the best sci-fi movies of all time. Yeah. A legend in that. And I do think the second and third Earth, there's some good moments in both of those, but there's some just really odd story issues. There's also some really odd CGI and visual issues. And then, of course, they did a fourth film, which was mostly hated by almost everybody many years later. It just felt really odd and strange. And now we're looking at a semi kind of reboot happening, but I feel like The Matrix was one that was right on the cusp of, it made a ton of money. Let's not get that wrong, that the Matrix trilogy killed at the box office. But story and immersion and everything else for those other two, it really dropped the ball to a fantastic film we got in the first.
Yeah, I have absolutely nothing to add to that. I could not agree more with everything you said there. The original Matrix is one of the most innovative science fiction films to come out at its time. Like, there was nothing like it that we had ever seen in a film like that when it came out. It was groundbreaking. It was incredible. It was kind of redefining an entire genre and a new way of making film that had nothing we had seen come before. And I think people forget as time has gone on just how incredibly crucial that film was to the action genre, the science fiction genre, the CGI genre, really.
Blockbuster films.
Like that was just such an incredible experience that never was able to really recapture the exact same magic in the follow-ups, but still, and that's another one that I think was so important with the music and the soundtrack to it, also helping play an incredible role, because that original Matrix soundtrack was phenomenal. The other two that came across behind it were both really good too, but that's just another perfect pairing of that dark, heavier, brooding music that kind of goes along with it, that just really helped amplify an incredible story. And it's something that I know creatively they keep trying to chase that magic and haven't exactly followed up on it really well. But the first film is just an all-time classic, and one that I see why they kept going to that well. But man, as a standalone, that could have been just a perfect standalone film, like it really could have been. But alas, it's on our trilogy list for a reason.
Yeah, and how many hundreds of films after that first Matrix came out tried to mimic it, tried to recreate it, but also use the bullet time. Like you have so many directors who still kind of use that slow-mo that they started and perfected. Right. Yeah. Zack Snyder's a big one that became a staple of his films, is kind of what started with the Matrix, and he's changed and done it in different ways, but it's that still type. I still remember the Scary Movie franchise making fun of it with their next one after after the Matrix came out, but it was one of the bigger disappointment ones because that first one was so stellar, and the next two, like, I can enjoy them, but they have so many problems and issues that they kind of let it. It's almost a perfect examples of letting something get out of hand because you went too heavy with CGI and you tried to go really crazy with the story because it's got those religious religious parts to it, and you have just so much to try to do, and it didn't fully stick the landing, and then you kind of undid so much stuff by doing a fourth one and it just, I had to include it because it is one of the biggest film trilogies of all time, box office wise and culturally, but it really it should have been perfect, but it just missed the mark with those other two lagging behind.
I would agree with that. It's really hard to add anything to that, because I think we really covered everything that we wanted to say with that, because it's I just really wish at the end of the day they just left it as a solo movie, but it makes its way onto our list as a trilogy, and we kind of got to judge it based on the totality, not just the brilliance of the first one. But one last category before we get to our perfect trilogy, because it's a one of one, and we know what we're building up to. But these are probably as close to perfect A+ tier trilogies, I think, if you keep them in 3 movies. Now, a couple of these on this list are going to be a little controversial because there are additional films that are in the franchise, so it's kind of cheating a little bit with it. But these are what we consider to be near perfect trilogies, right? So I would be remiss. I want to put my personal favorite. Probably my second personal favorite film trilogy of all time, and it's the Dark Knight trilogy. Like, you want to talk about Batman Begins was such a really, really good and underrated, in my opinion, kickoff to this trilogy. Like, I don't think Batman Begins gets as much love as it should for being this introduction to the Christopher Nolan trilogy of Batman films. Like, an incredible story of, Batman becoming the Dark Knight himself, becoming, with the League of Shadows, with Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, like his whole story kind of going away and learning how to become this incredible hand-to-hand fighter, and learning, kind of embracing who he is as Batman, before obviously leading into one of my personal top 2 or 3 favorite films of all time, and it's The Dark Knight. If you've never seen The Dark Knight, you might be one of 2 people left on the planet that have never seen it, but it's, in my opinion, my personal favorite comic book movie, if you want to call it that, of all time. Number 1 on my list. It's an absolutely incredible movie. Obviously, the incredible performance by Heath Ledger as the Joker really carries so much weight in that, and really made it, and it went from being a potential already really good film to an absolute all-time classic, iconic film. One of the best performances you'll ever see in any film of any genre. The way he just completely loses himself in the madness of that character is just an incredible movie, and it made billions of dollars at the box office for a reason. And then you have the follow-up, the third one, which is The Dark Knight Rises, which, could be considered the weakest of the 3 potentially, but still a really, really good third movie. You have, of course, the goofy everybody has a Bane imitation of Tom Hardy as Bane. Like, talking about it, you do a really funny one that makes me laugh every time you do it. But still a really solid third film and a really incredible cast in that one, too. You have Anne Hathaway as Catwoman, who does a really incredible job in this film, too. You have Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it. Like, a really solid ending that overall has a few things you could nitpick about, but almost a perfect trilogy really does. And it's carried so heavily by just one of the best, in my opinion, the best sequel of all time in The Dark Knight.
And it's one that no one expected to see someone like Christopher Nolan do in a comic book movie. And he is one of the greatest directors that we have. He is our generation's Spielberg and Hitchcock and all that. Like, he is that incredible with what he did. I can't wait for the Odyssey to see what he does with that storyline, because I am kind of a history buff with stories, and I love the old stories like the Odyssey and that kind of stuff that tells different tales of that time period and everything. But you just didn't expect Christopher Nolan to be doing this, and there are some problems. Like, people have issues with Christian Bale's Batman voice. When anytime I try to imitate it, I turn into the College Humor Batman.
The version of it, yeah.
But there are issues. I get what he's trying to do, because if you look into a lot of these comic book films, the masked and unmasked version of the voices are almost identical. So he was trying to give something that, it's so ridiculous you wouldn't be able to tell that's actually Bruce Wayne because of how he talks as Batman. But it is. But yeah, The Dark Knight is an incredible film, so well directed and everything. But yeah, just Heath Ledger steals the show completely. I will defend to the end of time that his performance as a Joker is one of the greatest performances of all time, not just for a comic book film, of all time. The way he lost himself in that character, the slow ticks and changes that you can see in the character throughout, the mental instability that you can see shift and change to the point. There's some ridiculousness to it, how Harvey Dent's laying in the hospital bed, and he has burned half of his face, so he's going to be a little out of it, but he can't clearly see that's the Joker until he brings the mask down. He's still got the makeup caked on his face and saying the hi and stuff, and then he gets mad. That was a little ridiculous, but just one of the greatest performances of all time that ended up costing him his life because of issues with sleeping afterwards with that. But it's one of the greatest performances of all time outside of a comic book film. That is one of the most incredible performances. I'm glad he got the Oscar after his passing for it, because there's just no way that could have been given to anybody else. There's some great performances that year, but nothing matched what he did. And I will say, Rises did drop the ball a little bit for the ending, but it is so close. Like, Tom Hardy was a great Bane. You can make fun of the voice and stuff as much. I did feel like it just didn't give us that cohesive, good ending to it, because it kind of has that time jump and that jump at the end. And Bane not feeling physically he's a good opponent, but you weren't really feeling the villain part of him, of being like this grandiose final villain along with Talia al Ghul and everything. That it just didn't feel like it had, compared to what you had with The Dark Knight, it just couldn't live up to that villain and what they had to really end that trilogy on a high note. It is still a fantastic trilogy. It's that one that just, that third film just makes it just so short of being perfect.
That's why we call it a near miss, right? It's almost there. It's closer than anything we've gotten so far that we've talked about as far as nailing all three films. Like, it's as close as, like, we call it A+ for a reason. Still, like, go back and watch all three films regularly with no problem, but not completely perfect, but pretty close. Like, they get pretty close to it. Silly voices aside.
I've got to toss out there probably the biggest trilogy of all time, potentially, when you come from a cultural aspect and box office and just what it meant for film and everything else, is the original Star Wars trilogy. Of course, it started out as one film, as Star Wars. Then it got changed to A New Hope, and then we got the other three. Like, the impact that Star Wars has had on pop culture, on film, on box office, on sci-fi, on everything. even trying to talk about it feels like you're underestimating the impact that this has had on a global scale from all the novels and games and films and TV shows and everything in the Star Wars universe has gone out that has created such a cult following and everything that really started with New Hope, which was an incredible, unique film that we hadn't seen up to that point when it first came out. And then again, we talk about the pinnacle of sequels and Empire Strikes Back being hailed as probably the greatest sequel of all time, of head of everything. And as much as I do enjoy Return of the Jedi, like it just had such a different feeling and everything else. You're bringing in the Ewoks and you're doing, everything that they try to do with that one. And of course, the special editions adding in Anakin in a different way. And, George Lucas going back and messing with it and doing the special editions and us not getting. But if you're talking about the original 3 theatrical releases of these films, they're incredible, and it's one of the biggest cultural phenomenons of all time when you're talking about these films, even though Return of the Jedi does have probably the most issues out of any of them, and it does bring it down, but the significance of the first 2 and what Star Wars has meant, it has to be up there as being one of the most near perfect trilogies of all time because of just everything that it accomplished and did in an incredible way. And Return of the Jedi is just, it's hailed as most everyone's least favorite of all, but it still encapsulated this great trilogy that had twists and turns and just such amazing stuff that it spawned so many TV shows, prequels, sequels, everything else, and you can have your debates about the prequels and the sequels and everything, but the original 3 were just phenomenal.
Yeah, and the impact that they had on culture and society, like you said, 4 decades later, we're still talking about it as having cultural relevance, which is almost impossible this length of time later. Like the impact cannot be understated. Like it's huge. It showed that science fiction can be mainstream. Like it's one of the few films that, like, the film series that showed that what can be possible not only through film, but its impact that it can have on people. Like it's. You would be remiss to not talk about the importance of that trilogy. Like you said, they're not perfect films. Empire Strikes Back is an incredible movie. It's one of the best, like you said, one of the top 3, 4, 5 sequels of all time. It definitely is one. And my next one that I'm going to talk about is right up there as well. But yeah, you'd be remiss to not talk about how important it is. I mean, to this later, it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise for a reason. Like, there's a reason, like, when the sequels came out, that they were sold out midnight screen. The midnight screening really became popularized because of Star Wars. Like, the demand was so high for more of the franchise that they started offering those midnight screenings and all these other things that became cultural events. And, it really helped push, the way people went to the theater even forward into the 21st century, where now we're getting movies that, instead of having the traditional Friday release, and they're not having the midnight Thursday night Friday releases, they're releasing films even earlier now. Like, you're getting, like, we go to movies all the time on Thursday nights now, like that. And a lot of that wouldn't have happened had Star Wars not had the positive impact that it did. Look what happened when Phantom Menace came out. It broke box office records, like, opening weekend. Guess what happens when you get the new sequel versions? Remember how big the first movie of the sequels were, and how, like, that's probably the most commercially successful of all of them. Like, I think it's still a top 5 movie grossing all time.
Yep.
Like, it's had that long lasting of an impact, and you can't understate that. It's so important to the history of cinema that I agree it deserves a place on this.
And it had one of the most talked about twists of all time. Like, if you want to talk about movies having a twist that you didn't see coming, one of the first one that pops in your head is Darth Vader being Luke Skywalker's father. Like, that is of the big, sorry, spoilers.
Just kidding.
No. But it's one of the talked about. If you're trying to talk about the best twist in movies that you didn't expect, that is one of the biggest ones that were ever talked about. Because especially when it came out and you didn't have social media, and you had to have had to have everything word of mouth, and you had to have people kind of being secretive about, okay, we can't really talk about this movie because it's going to spoil this huge twist, and that not, like, everybody knew when they were filming it what was going to be said. Like, it was just so many different layers and aspects of Star Wars. Just, you cannot have a trilogy list without Star Wars being near the top.
Absolutely, and it's very deserving of its place on the list. I want to move us into talking about, you want to talk about near perfect, and this could also have, you can make an argument, have been included in our last list, and in my opinion, the single greatest sequel of all time, and I will stand on business on this, and that's the Godfather trilogy. The Godfather, original Godfather, all-time classic film. The Godfather Part 2, in my opinion, better than Godfather Part 1. You can make that argument. I will fight anybody that thinks otherwise. Godfather Part 2, incredibly brilliant film. You want to take those first two films, and you could put them in anybody's top 10 list of all-time films, and nobody would really argue with you. Like,
they have to be there.
It was peak Martin Scorsese at his absolute maximum power right there. Just incredible films. The pinnacle of filmmaking. It was so influential for so many different types of films and genres and what was possible on film and just how to make an incredibly good film. The third film, garbage. Not a good film at all. But the first two are so S-tier movies that you have to include it in an A+ list no matter how bad the third film was. First two, pinnacle of cinematography, pinnacle of filmmaking, almost perfect. Had the third film held up to the first two, it would be a hot debate with the other, in my opinion, the other trilogy that we're going to talk about when we talk about our perfect one, right up there with it, and you would have a hard time convincing me otherwise. The first two, incredible, pinnacle of filmmaking, just phenomenal films.
I don't know if I have much else to add to that. You're absolutely correct. Godfather Part 2 was so incredible and much better than the first Godfather, which was an incredible film as well. But yeah, that third one is where it just really fell off a cliff. Like, it just could not nail that ending, and it wasn't good. But you said the strength of the first two still makes it be one of the best trilogies of all time. Even if, like, you're giving the first two a 10, you're giving the last one like a 7, those two are still so good that you have to have it in that list because they're such an incredible trilogy.
Correct.
And yeah, you can't really argue with the Godfather Part 1 or 2 being on anybody's favorite film list, and you have to have that trilogy up there as well, even as we've said, the third one being so bad.
It drug the third one along.
The first two drug that third one along. Just forget about that guy, but we're so good that you can forgive us for it.
If you were to talk about just a 2-film story, like if the third one had never been made, you could make the argument that The Godfather is the greatest story of all time in film. You could. The first two are that good. Incredible performances, Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, just phenomenal. You talk about so many names come out of that cast, and then you give us the third one. The third one was so weak, but the first two, pinnacle of filmmaking. I would stand that up against any 1-2 punch of a film of all time, and it would hold its weight with anyone.
Yeah, another franchise that has a weaker film in it that the other two really hold up. That weaker one is Indiana Jones. Like, the first and the third are so incredible. They're so well done.
That's where we cheat a little.
Action, adventure, comedy, and stuff in it. And yeah, we're going to cheat a little bit because there was a fourth that I can't. Was there a fourth?
Something about a skull. I don't know.
But, the first one was so incredible and gave us some of the most memorable action scenes, and along with Blade Runner and Star Wars and everything else, skyrocketed Harrison Ford to being a pinnacle of the action star and everything else. But Temple of Doom was that weird one that George Lucas was going through a divorce and having a hard time, and he wrote that, and they were all religious-based films, but you left the Nazis behind for this cult and the mountains and the monkey brains and all that stuff. It was even though it gave us Short Round and it gave us, some really... There's some fun stuff in it. It was so strange and such a departure that when they came back to the third one, that almost felt like it ignored the second one and went back to what they were doing with the first one, and bringing Sean Connery in as his dad and everything else. Those two are so good that it makes you forget just how weak Temple of Doom is, but you can also be like, all right, we're going to forget there's a fourth. And the fifth one was okay.
Sure.
But for the most part, you're going to look at this as a trilogy because it took so long for them to decide to revisit and go back to it. And that's why we're cheating a little bit, because Crystal Skull was bad. Fifth one was okay. Like, I enjoyed it for the most part, but
it's that it's bad too.
You could have taken fourth and fifth one and never done them, and I would have been happy just to have these three, because the first and the third are so incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark, all-time classic film as well. Like, it's so good. In my opinion, one of the more underrated films, honestly, because of just how good that movie is. I got to admit, the one I have the most fun watching is The Last Crusade, and I don't know why. The whole, you have chosen wisely, just the whole absurdness of the Holy Grail and the adventure they go on in that story is just so over the top but fun. In my opinion, I get the most enjoyment watching that.
Learning that
and
Indiana was
the name
named
of the
after
dog
the
and all
dog.
that stuff, and just Sean Connery, just amazing performance from Sean Connery is Indiana Jones,
Especially with his thick accent still there. It doesn't fully make sense that he's Indiana's dad, but you really don't care.
Don't care at that point. It is so fun and so good. But yeah, I mean, first and the third, absolutely fantastic movies. The second one is definitely a left turn. It's like, oh, we needed you to keep going straight, but you veered off to the left, and that road will eventually come back to the straight road you should have been on the entire time. But it definitely drug it down a little bit because it is a weird movie. It is such a weird,
dark and weird,
like Indiana Jones film. But they course corrected and they got it right on the third one. It's just such a fun time. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Back to the Future trilogy as well, which an absolutely incredible 1-2 punch of the first two films. The third film is probably the weakest, but it's still a fun movie.
Still have a ton of fun.
It's still a really fun movie. The first two, awesome. Back to the Future one, I keep saying it, but it's true. Like, these are iconic films. One of the best films ever made. The original Back to the Future was awesome. The second one was a ton of fun too. The third one, like you said, a little bit weaker, but still a fun film overall. Almost perfect trilogy of films, but man, that first one, just what an insane, incredible classic film.
It's one of those trilogies on here, past all the others that everyone says, do not remake, do not redo, do not touch this trilogy ever again. You are not going to make a fourth. You are not going to reboot it.
Correct.
And that's not just Robert Zemeckis and Spielberg and everyone else who had hands in this. It's fans, it's critics, it's everybody in film saying,
don't touch it.
You do not touch the Back to the Future trilogy. Like, it's perfect as it is. The third one's weaker, but I still have a lot of fun going back to the Old West and kind of redoing things in the same way that they had done at that point. Like, it felt like maybe if you left it at 2, there would have been 2 of the most perfect films that you had done.
Make the argument.
I don't think 3 is bad, but it is weaker.
Sure.
But it's still just so much fun. Like, it's such a unique film that there's nothing else like it. Like, originally the time travel was going to be in like a refrigerator or something else, and then they got the DeLorean, and of course between Michael J. Fox, coming in late after the already been filming to recast that role and becoming the pinnacle of his career, being Back to the Future. I mean, he's had a ton of big roles, but nothing bigger than Back to the Future is Marty McFly. And it was also because of the time and special effects. With Star Wars and everything else, you started seeing bigger special effects movies, but the way they were able to pair the future with the past and mix those scenes, especially I give credit to the second one because of how they took footage and things they did in that first film and revisited from different angles and did more stuff with it. It was such an inventive, ahead of its time type of films, but they're just feel good, fun, action, sci-fi, adventure, comedy. Just, it nailed everything so well. Perfectly cast, even though they did recast the craziness with the second one with just having so much. But it was just so much fun, so well done. It is incredible. And one more I want to touch on here is because a lot of people may not give animated films their due justice when it comes to storytelling and everything else, but Toy Story 1 through 3 is a near perfect trilogy of hitting you with emotion and a great story of growing up and hitting you in the feels with everything we know. They did Toy Story 4, Toy Story 5 is about to come out, so they're still kind of stretching it. But if you looked at Toy Story 1 through 3 as its own trilogy, which it really is, it's fantastic. It's such good for kids, good for adults. Such a well done, touching, emotional story. The third one being kind of the weaker out of it, but the first 2 were incredible. The third is still very good film. It's probably the best animated trilogy that you could argue about of all time, because it is just that masterfully told with the storytelling, with the perfect voice cast behind everybody, how they handled everything with those first 3 Toy Story films. It's just absolutely incredible. Even hearing, like, I think Quentin Tarantino has kind of said the same thing, that Toy Story 3, the first 3 Toy Stories, are some of his favorite films of all time. It's like, they were just so brilliantly done. That was unique and really skyrocketed Pixar to being what they are, but they had cultural significance as well. Like, it's just those 3 incredible animated films.
Yeah, I have absolutely next to nothing to add to that. They're the best arc of storytelling for animated films I've ever seen. Like, I'm a grown man with no kids, and I get emotional watching that. Like, you can really resonate with the story. Like, growing up and losing a part of your childhood and like, you know, just moving on from things that you were, you know, your toys that you had as a kid. Like, who couldn't resonate with that? And it's done with just incredible humor and heart. And it's just an almost completely perfect trilogy of films. It is cheating because they did go on and make the 4th one. And the 4th one is really good too. I like the 4th one. The 4th one was fun. Gets a little silly with the inclusion of Forky or whatever. Like, they try to shoehorn an extra character in there, or Sporky. But like, the 5th one, we'll see what they get out of it too. But man, those first 3, I agree. Like, if they were just a standalone trilogy, I have a hard time calling it a trilogy now just because of that. But like you said, we're cheating. We're cheating a little bit. But yeah, you have to include it on there. I can't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, and finally getting around to what we consider our number 1, the greatest trilogy of all time. You've heard us talk about it several times, all the time, many times.
It's Air Bud.
It's Air Bud, yeah. Air Bud is just incredible. That dog deserves every award possible ever.
He's the goodest boy.
Just gets me emotional talking about it.
Does every time. Such a good boy.
But you want to take it away? What is our number 1 perfect trilogy of all time?
Guys, it's the Lord of the Rings. It can't be anything other than that. You want to talk about a 3 set of films that, as the story progresses, it just gets better and better and better. In my opinion, it is the rare franchise that gets better as it goes, and it peaks in the final film. Like, I've said multiple times on here, The Return of the King is my favorite movie of all time. I think it is an absolutely perfect movie from start to finish, and in context of sticking the landing in a storytelling way. Like, it's an incredible movie. The Two Towers is an incredible sequel that is on par with the third film as well. It's a lot of people's favorite films. Like, it has the greatest cinematic battle scene of all time, in my opinion, the Battle of Helm's Deep. Like, it's a perfectly shot, casted, acted, performed storytelling film. It checks every box of what you want in a good film, but it extends it over 3 films. Like, you get this entire arc that starts with as something simple as at the end of the day, it's an evil ring that you have to throw into a volcano to destroy before it consumes the entire world. Like, that is the bare basic minimalist Cliff Notes, get you a D- on your report of the story, but they do such an incredible job of world building and character introduction and character progression. It gets better and better and better as it goes on, and it's so impossible for a film franchise to do. You can make an incredible individual film. You can make an incredible 2-story arc, as we've talked about with several other films on the list. It is so hard to do that and then follow it up with such a creative peak on your third film that closes the story in such an incredible way and brings everything full circle and hits that climax of a story where you need to hit it to. And still to my day, until the end of my days, and I'm going to look straight in the camera when I say this, I ugly cry at the end of this third film every time I watch it. When Aragorn says to those hobbits, "You kneel to no one," tears, and I'm welling up thinking about it. That's how emotional I get. But it's such a perfect trilogy.
Yeah, of course, those who are big into fantasy and all that stuff are going to get more out of it. And if you're not as big into fantasy, I still think there's so much that you can get out of this because, he created, Tolkien created Middle Earth of massive, expansive story across The Hobbit, across The Lord of the Rings, which you can either look at it as one book, which it was, split into 3 by the publisher and everything else, but you also have all the other stories and the unfinished stories that he wrote about Middle-earth. There's a lot of stuff that's left out from the books and stuff in here, but you got to remember, these movies, without the extended editions, are 3 hours plus long. So you're looking at a 9 to 10 hour story between these 3 films. You get the extended edition taking us to 12 to 13 hours of content in there, and they still didn't tell everything. That you have to realize that they just couldn't show and have everything. But yeah, just absolute perfection. No actor out of place. Everybody fit their character and their role so well. I mean, it's just, you cannot think of anybody else as Frodo, as Samwise, as Gandalf, as Aragorn, which I will bring up. There's potential rumblings that they might be recasting Aragorn for the Hunt for Gollum film, and no.
Hate it.
No.
I get it. He's over.
Viggo or nothing.
Yeah.
If you don't have Viggo, you don't put him in the movie. Plain as day, don't do that. Correct. Viggo was the perfect Aragorn, who just had the charisma, the charm, the amazingness. You have an entire language that was created for the Lord of the Rings that Tolkien had created, and that was masterfully done in here with the Elvish language. I mean, multiple languages that were done, because you have that of Mordor, you have that of the elves and everything else. But yeah, it just, you can't think of anybody else in these roles. Like John Rhys Davies being Gimli was such incredible. The guy's 6'1". He wasn't a small guy, but he was the one out of all of them. Like, how did they make him be like
incredible? There's
times when you can tell it's CG to have the actor standing in front of others, but he was one of the biggest ones, even though he had so much problems with the allergies to the latex and everything else, that he was just incredible to see as Gimli, and Orlando Bloom as Legolas. Like, nobody was miscast. Everybody was perfect. And you have Christopher Lee as Saruman, who just, he had met the only one of the cast who had met J.R.R. Tolkien, who had read the books every single year, and you get him in that with his deep voice and the menacing style. Like, no one was miscast. And then you add on top of that a score that is absolutely legendary, one of the greatest scores ever written for a film series, because it had so much weight and emotion and liveliness and love and hope and dread. It just carried every scene on this just magical, beautiful score that just accompanied the film like no other. The set designs, the costume designs, the weapon designs, just Weta, who this made them be a household name completely after this for practical and special effects. Like, they nailed every aspect of this film. Like, nothing was done wrong. You cannot say anything was really done wrong. Like, you can complain about stuff not being in there, characters not being in that you wanted to see. They took and crafted and created a story that flowed beautifully, worked incredibly well together without feeling like it was missing anything. Like, if you, I've read all the books, I know what's missing, but I didn't care, because they created this version of it that was so intricately and beautifully done. Like you said, it just got better. Fellowship of the Ring just took you on the adventure and set up the emotion and the characters, and you got the feeling of dread and really got the adventure going, and it felt like such an adventure. And then, you know, you end, which it does feel like each film ends like 3 or 4 different times before we actually get to the end. I could do a little nitpicking on that, but it's so perfect outside of that that I really can't nitpick it, because I didn't care. Like, oh, you're giving me more? Thank you. Yeah. And going on, like you said, Two Towers brings up, you know, taking us to the world of man and bringing in Mordor is starting its attack, and you're getting more of the dread and what it actually means that Sauron's forces are marching and everything that's going. And then Return of the King just bringing everything together in a gigantic battle at the end, but the emotion of this journey that they've gone on. And again, I've seen people nitpick that. Did Frodo really throw the ring? Did he really accomplish his mission? Because it's Gollum who bites the ring off and falls in with it. So Frodo really didn't end up. Yeah, Frodo did it. Sam did it. They all did what they did.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. Everything done. But yeah, just every aspect of it was just unbelievably incredible, of the detail and the care and attention that they did, like, it's just unmatched in the scale and the quality
Agreed.
that they put out.
Agreed. And you summed it up perfectly. Like, everything in the films has a purpose. And one thing I want to give it credit for, if you never got to go on the journey of the films as they were being released into theaters, like say you didn't watch them until they all came out on DVD or Blu-ray, or you're late to the game and like appreciating Lord of the Rings, there was a noticeable fever pitch for these films as they were coming out, especially after the first one. The first one had a lot of success. It became a huge hit. But when you got to the second film and then even the third film, the fan anticipation kept crescendoing. And what I give them the most credit for is it paid off. Because there's so many times, how many times can you think about being so anticipatory of something, like a story coming out, a show coming out, a movie coming out, a game that you're looking forward to? How often are you met with disappointment because it didn't meet the expectations that you had set for it? Didn't have that problem with Lord of the Rings. This absolutely delivered. Obviously, Return of the King is the most critically successful of all of the films, won a ton of Oscars, deservedly so. It is still to this day tied for the most Oscar wins. And I know that's not the be-all, end-all for a great film, but that's just, a film like that is not supposed to win those awards. Like, that genre film classically does not get award love and nominees and buzz.
High lore fantasy films, yeah, they don't get the nod.
Don't get love in that realm of Hollywood normally. And it is still tied for the most Oscars ever given to a film of all time. That is how absolutely brilliant it was that they stuck the landing. And they got to it. They got there in the third one. The third one's a perfect movie. It's a perfect combination of this world building, of this story. It doesn't miss any beats whatsoever. These films are notoriously long, but they never feel like they're dragging. And that's the beautiful part about these films, is they do such a good job, like I said, world building, character progression, on the backdrop of some of the most gorgeous set pieces you've ever seen in your life. I still have a personal bucket list trip that I want to take to New Zealand to see where this is done. I'm going to ugly cry if I ever get to take it. Like, I just know, because it's just so visually beautiful and just incredibly well shot, and I'm just like, man, it's perfect. In my opinion, it is completely perfect from start to finish. There will never be, I will be surprised if there's ever a film trilogy that does everything so well from start to finish and lands in the way that it lands, and such a satisfactory ending, and just tells that complete story to a T. It's a full perfect circle story from start to finish. And it deserves its place at the top of our list of the greatest film trilogies of all time, because it does. It's perfect in every sense of the word. I don't have the same nitpicks you did. I mean, the only thing you could talk about is maybe some of the little bits with Gollum weren't perfect. But even he got an incredible story out of it. And so much so that they're going back to them, put Aragorn in the frickin' movie or don't. But, like, even he's came full circle in that film. Like, he became a relatable character. You felt sorry for him. You hated him, and then you felt sorry for him. Like, they did such a good job of taking that journey with that character too. And like, everybody gets quality screen time. Nobody, even the side characters don't really feel like side characters. Side characters get full stories in this. Like, this is about as fully fleshed out. If you love character development, watch The Lord of the Rings, because you get it with so many characters. Arguably, the guy that gets the least amount of character development is Gandalf.
Yeah.
Who's still an iconic. He goes from being Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White, and he has like a personal sacrifice to do that. But he arguably has the least character development. He's one of the best characters in the movie. You know what I mean? Like, it does such a good job with all of it. And it just, I can't give it enough praise. It is one of those I will watch over and over and over again, and never get tired, and find as much joy watching it now for the 50th time that I've seen the trilogy versus the first time I watched it. Like,
and you can talk about the impact that it's had on the industry too, because Gollum, you hadn't really had a CGI character have as much depth to it. This really skyrocketed motion capture and digital characters having more meaning to it. I mean, we got the Planet of the Apes with Andy Serkis that is revered for how good it is, and they'd use a motion capture to get more emotion out of the actors for the apes and everything in it. But Lord of the Rings is what really skyrocketed the industry, saying like, hey, we can really make dynamic digital characters because of what Andy Serkis did with Gollum, what they did with Gollum of motion capture, and being able to not just have a CGI character be in the background or be we need to do this giant scene and we got to replace our regular actors with something CGI and then bring them back. This was a fully CGI character, other than, when we got to see him as Schmeagol and everything else, that it's a fully CGI character that had heart and emotion and depth and hates potatoes and wants wriggly rabbits and hates Samwise for cooking the rabbit and everything else. But you got emotion and you got depth, and it changed the industry, because not only in film, motion capture is a gigantic part of video games now that's helping them make much more dynamic, in-depth video games, looking at the Last of Us series and more like that really shows off what motion capture can do. And Lord of the Rings is one that catapulted motion capture into being a legitimate way that you can make a digital character in film and video game and TV and everything else be legitimate characters, because you have an actor actually. And Andy Serkis deserved more awards for what he did as Gollum, because he did just as much, if not more, than anyone else there, because he's having to put on the ridiculous suit so that they can remove him later. But he's splashing around the water, rolling around, doing everything that Gollum is doing, but he didn't get the credit he deserved at the time. He gets revered for it now, but at the time, they still weren't like, okay, well, why should he get awards or anything else for playing a digital character? It's just as much incredible work as someone playing them in person.
Agreed. And Andy Serkis is phenomenal, and I'm glad that he's getting the love he's getting now. But yeah, I mean, this is absolutely deserving of the top place. It's everything you want. It's phenomenal storytelling. It's great character development, unbelievable story, commercially successful. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise for a reason. Well-revered, industry-wide. It's perfect, in my opinion. It's the best film trilogy ever made, and you would be hard-pressed to make an argument otherwise as far as like overall quality across 3 films that is done so brilliantly that it's going to be hard for anybody to ever replicate, and have a good luck trying. You see so many people try that can almost get there, and we've talked about several of them to this point, but this is the one, in my opinion, that did it and did it well and did it better, even better as it went along. Like, it started off really incredibly, because Fellowship of the Ring does get slept on a little bit, I think, as far as all of the 3, but it was still an incredible film, and it just kicked off so much incredible world building that you did throughout the course of 3 movies, and it's perfect. I have no other words.
Well, the last thing I really want to touch on this, it was just because not only the theatrical edition so incredible that that's what everyone got into as we saw these 3, well, they decided to go back and they're going to make extended edition of these films. And we've had different extended editions throughout the years, and most of them didn't really add much to the films. They didn't really do much more. There's some, like the Ben Affleck Daredevil is actually a little bit better because of that director's cut they did. But you've gone back and forth with extended editions and director's cuts. Are they really better than the original films? Were they worth doing? And this is one of the rare examples where, as incredible as the theatrical editions are, 90% of the people, if not more now, will say the extended editions are their favorite part of this, that they go, even though they add like 3 hours of watch time between all 3 films together, that's the definitive editions now, is that you had 3.5 hour movies, and now you're adding 30 to 45 minutes more to each film. Okay, now they're each clocking in around 4 hours. They're well worth it. They're the greatest. They're the greatest example of an extended cut or director's cut, just adding even more. Because as you said, we know just how vast and expansive the Middle Earth lore is. And adding even more to it, you can say, well, when you're getting into 4 hours, it could just drag.
Sure.
But most people, when they talk about Lord of the Rings anymore now, are talking about the extended editions and not the theatrical editions, which is just an incredible thing to see. Like, they did so well in theaters, and they were so incredible in the original cut. How did you possibly make it even better?
Yeah, and they find a way.
With the extended editions.
They find a way. I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did. And watch both versions. Draw your own conclusions of it, but both on their own stand, phenomenal. I can't say anything less. I'm so glad we were in agreement on that. It wasn't a hard argument to make either one for either one of us, but I'm glad we got to kind of nerd out and talk about why we love it as much as we do, but very deserving in its place at number one.
Yeah, just absolutely incredible trilogy. That's almost, you've got two trilogies out of it. You got the theatrical and you've got the extended edition.
Correct.
Which both are incredible in their own right, and it was one of those shocking ones where the extended edition just
made it better.
Managed to go even better, even though you already had 3 hours worth of movie each.
It took perfect and made it perfecter.
Like he said, just the actors, the score, the design of everything, the way it was put together, there was no aspect of any of these 3 films that were done badly.
Agreed.
Everything was perfection.
Agreed.
And it changed the industry in many ways of how they looked at fantasy films and how they looked at digital actors and how they looked at a lot of different things. It changed a lot because this could have been seen as very risky because you're taking a very high fantasy story, a very older high fantasy story, and you're making it 3.5 hours each in theaters. It really could have been looked at and balked on that it was going to be bad, but instead it become one of the biggest impactful film trilogies I've watched in ever. Like it's had such a huge impact on me with my likes and everything else of just seeing the Lord of the Rings story being told in near perfection. Again, they didn't tell everything in the books. We would have, and I'm down for it, like 24 to 30 hours of Lord of the Rings there, but
it's hard to get a lot of people on board.
They did what they had to do and what they needed to do in such a perfect way. Perfect casting, perfect score, perfect set design, perfect everything. Like nothing was out of place. No one was out of place. Everyone did their job phenomenally. There's nothing negative I can say about this film trilogy. It is just perfect.
And that's the best way we could sum it up. So that's kind of how we feel about trilogies, man. I mean, look at us now. We're 100 episodes in. We've made it through 100 episodes. We cannot thank everyone enough for their continued support of the show. Anyone that's ever liked a video, added a comment, bought some merch, participated in discussion, showed it to a friend, we appreciate it so much. We're 100 episodes in, and we're not stopping anytime soon. We got so much to look forward to moving forward. But, man, 100 episodes. Here we are. We're coming up on 2 whole years of this show now, which is crazy. We've got
2 episodes left before the end of the year to knock out our second year. It's gone by fast. And
it really has.
We do appreciate everyone coming along this journey with us. And yeah, like I said, we're not quite done yet. We have what could be a future consideration for one of the best trilogies of all time, depending on how you feel, but it's had a cultural impact as well as the Avatar series. We have the first 2, which not only have been some of the highest grossing films of all time, but also game-changing when it comes to motion capture, to CGI. This is a world that is not a film series that is 90% digital, and it looks absolutely incredible. The story can have its issues, but it's such a incredible visual splendor, and we're going to be looking at Avatar Fire and Ash coming up next week. Again, after we see that, we could potentially be adding Avatar into some of the greatest trilogy of all time, even though they're technically saying that they're going to 4 and 5, but the actors and James Cameron himself said this is kind of wrapping up as a trilogy with, if we end up making enough money to do 4 and 5, they're kind of their own thing in a way. That they're tied, but they're not exactly. So this is going to kind of be a trilogy with Fire and Ash, and it's going to be really interesting to see if this is concluding the Jake Sully story and that kind of stuff. We don't know exactly how that is and what exactly the story of 4 and 5 would be. It very well could make it into a lot of top trilogy list if it nails this potential ending.
Yeah, I mean, the jury's going to be out. It's crazy to think of 2 multi-billion-dollar movies needing to do the same for the third one, but that's how much pressure is on. You got a lot to live up to commercially successful-wise, so we'll see how this third film stacks up. I'm excited to go see it this week. We're going to have a fun time talking about it on the next episode. I'm looking forward to it.
And just how much $400, $500, $600 million or whatever it's taken to make it to these. They've been huge undertakings. Like, I think Zoe Saldana has talked about how she was in, I think, her 20s when she started, and she'll be in her 50s to close to 60 before she's done doing all 5 of them and everything else. Like, they've taken a very long time to get out, but you can't underestimate the cultural impact that these films have had, because they were the forefront proponent of 3D becoming huge in theaters. And it's kind of leveled off a little bit. You still have plenty of 3D showings and stuff out there, but it's had a huge impact on digital character filmmaking and for 3D filmmaking and everything, because a lot of 3D films was just like, all right, I'm going to throw a ball at you, and the ball looks like it's going to hit you and bring it back. But this was more intricate when it came to 3D, about making the world feel more alive and pop and having, I still remember seeing it for the first time being one of the bigger 3D films I had watched, of just seeing the computer screens and the words popping out at me and the foliage coming out a little bit more. And it wasn't the full-on gimmick that 3D was kind of at that point, of everything was just throwing stuff at the screen to make it look funky. This was actually using 3D as a tool to enhance the film.
Yeah, definitely innovative in that creative space. Hopefully it does well, man. Like, hopefully we can add to the list of near perfect or really well, or this third film could not be good. We'll talk about it. I'm excited to dive in and see what we get out of it.
And to see if the first 2 films, if it does kind of falter with the third, were they good enough to make it be a good sequel, or is one that will be added to our should have been perfect trilogies in there? Because they do have some story issues. I have some issues with how the second one ended, of just kind of making some characters unkillable when they really should have, and just kind of stretching that stuff out. But they're still beautiful films to watch, and have a big significance to their storytelling, what they did, because there's really nothing else out there like this.
No.
Like, you can say it rips off some other stories that have been told, but it does it in its own unique way. So, yeah, we'll find out next week if Avatar Fire and Ash lives up to being a solid third film and potentially catapulted into one of the top trilogies of all time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, checking it out. Good times talking about our favorite trilogies today. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. But thank you for tuning in to episode 100 here. For all those that have been with us from the beginning through all 100 episodes, we just greatly appreciate the support you've given us. But that's it for this one, and we'll see you on the next one.
To find all of the episodes of We'll Bring the Popcorn, go to our YouTube page, hit the like and subscription button so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room on any of the podcasting platforms that we're on, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And don't forget to go to willbringthepopcorn.com, where it has all of our archive videos, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store, so you continue to support the show in that way. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support.